The flight is $2,500 each. My mom said if you can't afford IT, stay behind. I nodded, then got an alert. My credit card had been used for 4 business class tickets, not mine. I opened my app, hit dispute all, and locked the account. My dad showed up at my apartment. I did not. The flight is $2,500 each, my mom said, looking right through me as if I were a ghost. If you cannot afford it, stay behind. I simply nodded and finished my water while my brother smirked. But 3 hours later, my phone lit up with a fraud alert. My credit card, the one I had not touched in 5 years and had left in a safe box at my parents' house, had just been charged $10,000 for 4 business class tickets on Qatar Airways. Not for me. For them. I did not scream. I did not call them to demand an explanation. I simply opened my banking app, hit the button that said, Dispute Transaction, and reported the card as stolen. They wanted a vacation. I was about to give them a federal investigation. My name is Jada, and at 30 years old my family still thought I was a broke data entry clerk, barely scraping by in a studio apartment. They had no idea I was actually a senior forensic accountant for one of the biggest firms in Chicago, specializing in high-level corporate fraud. It started at the Capitol Grill last Friday. My mother Lorraine had insisted on this dinner for weeks, claiming it was urgent. I arrived 10 minutes early, dressed in my usual work attire, a simple black blazer and slacks that my mother always called bland. When my family finally arrived 20 minutes late, they made an entrance that turned every head in the restaurant. My mother was wearing a fur coat, despite it being 50 degrees out, and my father Vernon walked in with his chest puffed out like he owned the building. Trailing behind them were my older brother Trayvon and his wife Jessica. Jessica flipped her blonde hair over her shoulder and handed her coat to the waiter without making eye contact. Trayvon, my brother, the so-called tech entrepreneur who had not launched a single product in 4 years, winked at me. "Hey little sis," he said, sliding into the leather booth, still driving that dented Honda I saw in the valet line. I took a sip of my iced tea and smiled. "It gets me from point A to point B, Trayvon. Not all of us need to lease a Range Rover to feel important." My mother slammed her hand on the table, causing the silverware to rattle. "Stop it, Jada," she hissed. "We are here to celebrate, not to listen to your jealousy. Tonight is about legacy." I stayed silent. In my family, legacy was a code word for spending money. We did not have to impress people we did not like. My father Vernon cleared his throat and adjusted his silk tie. He looked around the room, making sure the other diners noticed him. As a high school principal, he thrived on being the center of attention. "We have some big news," he announced. "Next month is our 35th wedding anniversary, and to celebrate, we have decided to take a family trip. A real trip, not just down to Florida. We are going to the Maldives." My mother clapped her hands together, her diamond bracelets clinking. "It is going to be magnificent, Jada. Overwater bungalows, private chefs, and most importantly, we will be meeting up with Jessica's parents there. It is time our families truly bonded on a level befitting our status." Jessica smiled, showing off her perfectly whitened teeth. "My dad is so excited," she said. "He has been saying that the Maldives is the only place one can truly relax away from the noise of the city." I looked at Jessica and felt that familiar tightening in my chest. She always spoke about her family as if they were Kennedys, but as a forensic accountant, I had a habit of noticing things others missed. Like the way she used 3 different credit cards to pay for lunch last week, or the way her designer bags never quite held their shape right. "That sounds expensive," I said, keeping my voice neutral. My mother rolled her eyes. "Quality costs money, Jada. Something you would know if you had a little more ambition. We have already booked the flights, business class on Qatar Airways. The tickets are $2,500 per person." She paused and took a long sip of her red wine, leaving a lipstick stain on the rim. "Now we have covered Trayvon and Jessica because Trayvon is currently reinvesting all his capital into his startup. He is building something for the future. But you, Jada," she looked me up and down, her gaze lingering on my plain wristwatch. "If you want to come, you will have to pay for your own ticket. And the villa share is another $3,000. If you cannot afford it, stay behind. We will tell Jessica's parents you had work obligations." The table went silent. Trayvon suppressed a laugh. Jessica looked at me with that fake sympathy that was worse than cruelty. "Oh, Jada," she said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. "Do not feel bad. Maybe next year you can join us if you save up. It is probably better this way. You would feel out of place anyway. I looked at them. My father who was busy checking his reflection and his spoon. My mother who was already typing on her phone, probably posting a status update about family blessings. My brother who was 33 years old and still asking our parents for rent money. And his wife who treated me like the hired help. They saw a failure when they looked at me. They saw a quiet mousy girl who crunched numbers for minimum wage. They did not know that my bonuses alone last year were more than my father's annual salary. They did not know that the Honda Civic was a choice I made, because I preferred investing in real estate over depreciating assets. They did not know that I could have bought everyone at this table a ticket to the Maldives and not even noticed the money leaving my account. I took a deep breath. You are right, Mom, I said calmly. $5,000 is a lot of money for me right now. I think it is best if I stay behind. Enjoy the trip. My father nodded approvingly. That is mature of you, Jada. Knowing your place is a virtue. The rest of the dinner was a blur of them discussing swimwear and which influencers they wanted to emulate. I paid for my own salad and left early claiming I had a headache. When I got to the valet, the attendant brought around my 2015 Honda. I tipped him $20 and drove home to my apartment in downtown Chicago. My building was secure with a doorman and heated garage, but my family had never visited me here. They stopped visiting 3 years ago when I refused to co-sign a loan for Trevin's second failed business venture. I walked into my apartment kicking off my heels. The space was modern and minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. It was my sanctuary. I poured myself a glass of water and sat down on my beige sofa ready to decompress. I was actually relieved I did not have to go. A week on an island with my mother critiquing my hair and Jessica making subtle comments about my skin tones sounded like torture. I was about to turn on the TV when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. Then it buzzed again and again. I picked it up expecting a text from my mom asking why I did not pay for the valet for everyone. But it was not a text. It was a series of push notifications from my banking app. I stared at the screen. $10,000. Pending. My heart hammered against my ribs, not out of fear but out of pure shock. I unlocked my phone and opened the app. The card number ended in 4098. I frowned. I did not have a card ending in 4098 in my wallet. I walked to my home office and pulled open the file cabinet where I kept my active cards. Nothing. Then I remembered. 5 years ago when I first started at the firm and got my first significant promotion, I had applied for a premium travel card with a high limit. I had used my parents' address because I was in between apartments at the time. When the card arrived, I had just moved out after a huge fight with my dad. I had left a box of paperwork and personal items in my old bedroom closet. I assumed the card was lost or expired. I had never activated it. Or so I thought. I sat back down, my mind racing as the pieces clicked together. My mother had gone into my old room. She had found the card. She must have seen the expiration date was still valid. But to use it, she would have needed to activate it. She would have needed my social security number and my mother's maiden name. Well, she was my mother, so she had the maiden name. And as for the social security number, my father had all our documents in his home office safe. They stole my identity. The realization was cold and sharp. They sat across from me at dinner, watched me eat my salad, listened to me say I could not afford the trip, and all the while they knew they had already bought their tickets on my dime. That was why Trayvon was smirking. That was why my mom was so insistent on the price. They were mocking me. They thought I was so checked out of my finances, so broke and disorganized, that I would not notice the charge until the statement came in the mail a month later. By then, they would be sipping coconuts in the Maldives. I looked at the time. It was 9:30 p.m. The transaction had gone through 10 minutes ago. They must have booked it immediately after dinner, ensuring the seats were locked in. I could picture them right now at my parents' house, clinking champagne glasses toasting to their cleverness. To Trayvon getting a free ride. To Jessica getting her luxury vacation. To Jada the fool paying for it all. My finger hovered over the call button next to my mother's name. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive back over there and throw the phone in their faces. But then my training kicked in. I am a forensic accountant. I do not act on emotion. I act on evidence. If I called them now, they would deny it. They would say it was a mistake, or worse, they would gaslight me into thinking I had offered to pay and forgot. They would guilt trip me. You are rich, Jada. You can afford it, helps the family. No, this was not a family dispute. This was theft. Wire fraud. Identity theft. I took a deep breath and opened the transaction details. There was a button at the bottom of the screen. Dispute transaction. I tapped it. A menu popped up asking for the reason. I scrolled past incorrect amount and duplicate charge. My thumb landed on the option that would burn the bridge forever. Fraud. Stolen card. The app asked for details. Do you have this card in your possession? No. Did you authorize this transaction? No. Do you know who might have made this transaction? I paused. I could type in their names, but the bank did not need names yet. They just needed to know if it was fraud. I selected yes for the unauthorized use. The final screen warned me. By submitting this claim, you are declaring under penalty of law that this charge is fraudulent. The bank will immediately cancel this card and initiate a criminal investigation if necessary. I looked at the family photo on my mantle. The one taken 10 years ago, before Jessica, before the money, before the bitterness. I looked at my father's smile. I thought about the slap in the face I received at dinner. Stay behind, she had said. Okay, Mom. I will stay behind. And so will you. I pressed submit. The screen loaded for a second, then a green checkmark appeared. Dispute submitted. Card ending in 40-98 has been locked. Attempted charges will be declined. I closed the app and set the phone down face down on the table. The room was silent. I walked to the kitchen and opened a bottle of wine. A nice vintage I had been saving. I poured a glass and took a sip, letting the rich liquid coat my tongue. Tomorrow they would head to JFK Airport. They would pack their designer suitcases. They would post their airport selfies. And when they walked up to that counter to check in, they were going to learn a very expensive lesson about forensic accounting. I sat there in the dark watching the city lights and waited for the morning to come. The next 24 hours were the most peaceful of my life, and yet the most chaotic for my family. While they were frantically packing their designer suitcases and calling car services, I was sitting in my living room wearing a charcoal clay mask and sipping a glass of Sauvignon Blanc. I had set my phone to do not disturb for everyone except my food delivery driver. But I did not completely cut myself off. I had one window open into their world. Jessica's Instagram page. My sister-in-law lived her entire life through the lens of her phone camera. If she drank a coffee, she posted it. If she bought a new lipstick, she unboxed it for her 3,000 followers, most of whom were bought she paid for. I knew for a fact that she would not be able to resist live streaming their grand departure. And I was right. At 4 p.m, my phone chimed with a notification. Jessica is live. I cast the video to my 65-inch television so I could watch the disaster unfold in high definition. The video opened with Jessica's face filling the screen. She was wearing oversized sunglasses indoors, and a white cashmere tracksuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Behind her, I could see the chaos of the international terminal at JFK. Hey guys, she chirped, waving at the camera with her perfectly manicured hand. We are finally here at the airport, about to check in for our dream vacation to the Maldives. It has been such a crazy week, but you know, we work hard, so we play hard. Show them the luggage, babe. The camera panned clumsily to my brother Trevon, who was struggling to push a cart stacked high with Louis Vuitton trunks. He looked stressed, but forced a smile when he saw the red recording light. First-class lifestyle only, he said, trying to sound smooth, but his voice cracked slightly. Behind him, my mother Lorraine was barking orders at my father. Vernon, be careful with my hatbox. That is vintage. She turned to the camera and adjusted her silk scarf. We are just so blessed to be able to take this time away to recharge. It is so important to prioritize family and luxury. I took a sip of my wine and laughed. They looked ridiculous. They were playing the part of the wealthy dynasty so well that they had actually convinced themselves it was real. They truly believed that the credit card swipe from last night was the end of it. They thought I was sitting at home crying over my budget while they jetted off to paradise. They had no idea that I had already severed the lifeline. I watched as they approached the Qatar Airways business class check-in counter. It was the priority lane with the red carpet. I could see the smug look on my mother's face as she bypassed the long line of economy passengers. She held her head high, looking down her nose at a tired mother struggling with a stroller in the regular line. That was Lorraine. She did not just want to be rich. She wanted everyone else to know they were poor. The agent behind the counter was a young woman with a polite smile. Jessica kept the camera rolling, propping it up against a pile of luggage so her followers could see the entire interaction. This was her moment. She wanted to capture the upgrade, the champagne, the exclusive lounge access. Instead, she was about to capture a felony in progress. "Passports, please," the agent said. I watched on my TV as my father handed over the stack of passports with a flourish. "We are all together," he announced loudly enough for the people behind him to hear. "4 for mail." The agent typed on her keyboard. The rhythmic clicking sound was audible even through the live stream. Then the clicking stopped. Her smile faltered. She frowned and typed something else, hitting the enter key harder this time. "Is there a problem?" my mother asked, her tone instantly shifting from gracious to annoyed. "We specifically requested window seats on the right side of the aircraft." The agent looked up. Her face was no longer friendly. It was professional and cold. "Sir, there is an issue with the payment method used for these tickets. The transaction has been flagged." My father laughed, a nervous booming sound. "That is impossible. It is a platinum card. Run it again." "I have run it twice, sir," the agent said. "The bank has declined the charge. And there is a note here from the issuer. This card has been reported as stolen and used fraudulently." The silence that fell over the group was deafening. Even through the screen, I could feel the oxygen leave the space. Jessica gasped and grabbed the phone, quickly ending the live stream. The screen went black, but I did not need to see what happened next. I knew the protocol. When a charge is flagged as high-value fraud at an airport, it is not just a declined card. It is a security incident. I waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then my phone began to vibrate. It was Trayvon. I let it ring. He called again and again. On the 4th try, I decided to answer. I paused the movie I had started and put the phone on speaker. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice. His voice was high-pitched and panicked. I could hear sirens in the background, or maybe it was just the airport announcements, but it sounded like chaos. "I am on the phone, Trayvon," I said, checking my nails. "Why are you yelling? I thought you guys were sipping champagne in the lounge by now." "Stop playing games, Jada," he shouted. "We are at the counter. The card declined. They are saying it is stolen. The police are walking over here right now, Jada. You need to call the bank right now. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you authorized it." I let out a long, dramatic sigh. "What are you talking about, Trayvon?" "What card?" "The card ending in 4098, he hissed. "The one Mom found in your room, the travel card. We used it to book the flights. Just call them and unlock it. We will pay you back when we get the investment money next month. I swear. Just fix this." I sat up straight on my couch, the clay mask tightening on my skin. "Let me get this straight, Trayvon. You are telling me that you and Mom went into my old bedroom, went through my personal files, found a credit card that belongs to me, and used it to spend $10,000 without asking me. And now, you want me to tell the bank that I said it was okay?" "Yes," he screamed. "We are family, Jada. Do not do this to us. Mom is crying. Jessica is hyperventilating. Everyone is staring at us. Fix it." I smiled. "No." "What do you mean, no?" he yelled. "I mean, no, Trayvon. I did not buy those tickets. I did not authorize that charge. If I call the bank and say I did, I would be lying. And unlike you, I do not commit fraud." "You little witch." My father's voice came onto the line. He had grabbed the phone from Trayvon. "Jada, listen to me. This is your father speaking. You are embarrassing this family. You are humiliating us in public. I order you to call the bank this instant. If we miss this flight, I will never forgive you. You stole from me, Dad," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "You stole $10,000 from your daughter. You did not ask. You just took. Because you think everything I have belongs to you. Well, it does not. That money is mine. That credit is mine. And the consequences are yours. Jada, please. Jessica's voice broke in. She sounded terrified. They are asking for our IDs again. The TSA guys are here. They are talking about detaining us for questioning. Please, Jada, I cannot go to jail. I have a brand to protect. I laughed out loud. A brand. You are a thief, Jessica. That is your brand now. I hung up the phone. I did not just hang up. I blocked the number. Then I blocked Dad. Then Mom. Then Jessica. I poured myself another glass of wine and went to the window looking out at the Chicago skyline. I could only imagine the scene at JFK. The Port Authority police would have arrived by now. Since the amount was over $5,000, it was a felony-level investigation. They would not be arrested on the spot necessarily, but they would be detained. They would be taken to a small, windowless room. They would be questioned separately. They would have to explain why they were in possession of a payment instrument that did not belong to them. They would eventually be released because family fraud is a gray area that usually requires the victim to press formal charges in person, but their trip was over. The airline would cancel the tickets permanently. They would be blacklisted from the flight, and the worst part for them would be the walk of shame. They would have to walk back out of the terminal past the long lines of economy passengers they had just sneered at, pushing their carts of Louis Vuitton luggage back to the curb. They would have to call a cab because their car service had already left. They would have to ride all the way back to the suburbs in silence, knowing that they had been caught. But the real kicker was the fine. Since the tickets were non-refundable and canceled due to fraud, the airline would likely charge a penalty. Plus, the airport security fee. They were probably out a few $1,000s of their own money just for the privilege of being humiliated. I slept like a baby that night. The next morning, I woke up to a quiet phone. No texts, no missed calls, just peace. I made myself a matcha latte and opened my laptop to check my work emails. But before I could log in, I saw a notification from a cousin in our extended family group chat. Did you guys see Lorraine's post she wrote? It was a screenshot of a status update my mother had posted at 3 a.m. It read, "The devil is working hard to tear this family apart. We were targeted by a malicious banking error and forced to cancel our trip. We are heartbroken, but we know that God gives his hardest battles to his strongest soldiers. Please pray for us as we deal with betrayal from within our own circle." I snorted into my coffee. Banking error. That was what they were going with. They were spinning the narrative already. They were the victims. I was the villain. They were going to come for me. I knew it. My father would not take this lying down. He was a man who prided himself on control, and I had just stripped him of it in the most public way possible. I checked my building security app. Everything was quiet in the lobby. But I knew they were coming. They had to come back from the airport sometime. They would sleep for a few hours, stew in their anger, and then they would come to my door. They would want an apology. They would want to scream at me in person since I had blocked their calls. Let them come, I thought. I looked up at the corner of my living room, where the small, blinking red light of my security camera sat nestled in the bookshelf. I had installed it months ago, not for burglars, but because I had a feeling this day would come. My family thought this was a fight about a vacation. They thought it was about money. They did not realize that for me this was a war for my independence. I had spent 30 years being the doormat, being the backup plan, being the wallet they dipped into whenever they wanted to feel rich. Yesterday I closed the wallet. Today, I locked the door. The pounding on my door sounded like a police raid. It was 2 a.m. I had been asleep for maybe 3 hours, drifting in that peaceful space between dreams and reality where my family did not exist. But they had a way of shattering peace. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. I checked the monitor on my nightstand. The lobby camera showed my father arguing with Earl, the night doorman. My father was waving his arms, his face distorted with rage, while Trayvon paced behind him like a caged animal. Jessica was leaning against the wall, looking exhausted and checking her reflection in the lobby mirror. I pressed the intercom button. "Earl, send them up." I could hear Earl's hesitation through the speaker. "Miss Jada, they are very agitated. I can call the police right now if you want." "No, Earl. Let them come. If they want to show, let us give them a front row seat." I grabbed my silk robe, wrapping it tight around my waist like armor. I did not turn on the main lights. I liked the shadows. They made me feel invisible and observant. I walked to the living room just as the elevator dinged down the hall. They did not knock this time. My father kicked the door. I unlocked it and opened it before he could damage the hinges. Vernon stood there still wearing his suit from the airport, but now it was rumpled. His tie was loose and sweat beaded on his forehead. He looked like a man whose world was crumbling, and he needed someone to blame. That someone was me. "You little witch," he roared, pushing past me into the apartment. The smell of stale airport coffee and nervous sweat filled my clean living room. Trayvon followed him, his eyes bloodshot. Jessica trailed in last, dragging her carry-on bag across my hardwood floor, leaving a black scuff mark. "How dare you?" my father screamed. He turned to face me, his chest heaving. "Do you have any idea what you have done? We were detained for 4 hours. 4 hours, Jada. They treated me like a criminal. Me, a principal, a pillar of this community." I leaned against the kitchen island, crossing my arms. "You are a criminal, Dad. You used a stolen credit card. That is called fraud. The police treat fraudsters like criminals. It seems the system is working perfectly." He lunged. It happened in slow motion. I saw the muscles in his neck tighten. I saw his hand raise. In the past, when I was a child, I would have flinched. I would have cowered and let him hit me because I thought I deserved it. But I was not a child anymore. I was a 30-year-old woman who boxed 3 times a week at an executive gym. As his hand came down, aiming for my face, I stepped to the side. Smooth. Calm. His hand hit the empty air, and his momentum made him stumble forward, crashing into the edge of my granite countertop. He let out a grunt of pain and clutched his side. "Do not touch me," I said, my voice low and steady. "If you ever try to hit me again, you will leave this apartment in handcuffs." Trayvon rushed to help Dad up, glaring at me. "Look at you," he spat. "You are enjoying this, aren't you? You are jealous because Mom and Dad actually love us. You are jealous because I am building a legacy, and you are just a lonely number cruncher. We missed a meeting with a top investor in the Maldives because of you. That trip was for business, Jada. You just cost this family millions." I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "There was no investor, Trayvon. I saw your business plan. It is a slide deck full of buzzwords and zero product. You were going to the Maldives to take pictures for Instagram, and you wanted me to pay for it." Jessica stepped forward then. She had been quiet, scanning my apartment with a look of disdain. She walked over to my sofa, running her hand over the fabric. She looked at the empty walls, which held only 2 pieces of very expensive abstract art. She looked at my minimalist shelving. To her untrained eye, my apartment looked empty. She did not know that the sofa was Italian leather imported from Milan. She did not know the art was worth more than her entire wardrobe. She saw lack of clutter and assumed poverty. "You know, Jada," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I get it now. I look at this place, and I understand why you are so bitter. It is sad, really. You live like this. So sparse, so cold." She gestured around the room. "In my family, we support each other. If my brother needed money, my father would give it without blinking. But I guess things are different for you people." I stiffened. The room went deadly silent. Even Vernon stopped groaning. "Excuse me," I said. "What do you mean by you people?" Jessica shrugged, checking her nails. "You know, your community. I know growing up in certain environments makes it hard to understand loyalty. You guys always seem to be fighting each other instead of sticking together. It is a crab in a bucket mentality, right? That is what Trayvon calls it. I just think it is a shame you cannot rise above your nature to help your brother." I looked at Trayvon. He looked away. He let his wife stand in my living room and insult our entire race just to justify his greed. He let her use stereotypes to cover up his theft. That was the moment any lingering guilt I had about the airport evaporated. "Get out," I said. My father straightened up, adjusting his jacket. "We are not going anywhere until you call the bank. You are going to call them right now, put it on speaker and tell them it was a mistake. You are going to tell them you gave us the card, or so help me God, Jada. I will make sure everyone in this city knows what an ungrateful daughter you are. I will ruin you." I walked over to the light switch on the wall, but instead of turning on the overhead lights, I pointed up to the corner of the ceiling. In the shadows, A small red light was blinking. Pulse. 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 Vernon squinted. What is that? That, I said, is a 4K resolution security camera with audio recording. It uploads directly to a cloud server that only I can access. I watched the color drain from his face. It has been recording since you walked in, I continued. It recorded you kicking my door. It recorded you admitting that you stole my card. It recorded you trying to assault me. I took a step closer to him. You are the principal of Lincoln High School, right? You are always talking about discipline and character. I wonder what the Board of Education would think if they saw a video of Principal Vernon attacking his own daughter at 2 a.m. I wonder what the parents would think. I wonder if you would still have a pension after they fire you for moral turpitude. Vernon opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the camera, then back at me. His arrogance was gone, replaced by pure terror. He knew I had him. He knew that in the era of social media, a video like that would end his career before breakfast. Trayvon looked nervous. Jada, you wouldn't. This is family business. It became legal business when you committed a felony, I said. Now get out of my house, all of you. And take your wife and her scuff marks with you. My father backed away towards the door, his eyes never leaving the red light. He looked small. For the first time in my life, the giant who had terrified me with his shouting was just a small, frightened old man. You will regret this, he whispered. But there was no power in it. I opened the door and held it wide. I already regret knowing you, Dad. Goodbye. Jessica hurried out first, keeping her head down. Trayvon followed, muttering curses under his breath. My father paused at the threshold. He looked at me one last time, searching for the daughter who used to beg for his approval. He did not find her. He found a stranger who was stronger than he would ever be. He walked out. I slammed the door and locked the deadbolt. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I walked back to the kitchen and poured the rest of the wine down the sink. I did not need alcohol. I needed a clear head. I went to my laptop and pulled up the security feed. I saved the clip. I backed it up to 3 different hard drives. I named the file Vernon Assault Evidence MP4. I sat there in the dark watching the clip replay. I watched his hand raise. I watched me dodge. I watched the fear in his eyes when I pointed at the camera. They thought this was over. They thought they could just walk away and regroup. But they did not know what I was planning for tomorrow. The airport was just a warning. The camera was just a shield. Tomorrow, I was going to pick up the sword. I opened my email and started a new draft. Subject: formal inquiry into unauthorized real estate transactions. I was done being the victim. It was time to find out exactly how deep their betrayal went. And I had a feeling that the credit card was just the tip of the iceberg. I looked at the time. 3 a.m. The banks would open in 6 hours. I needed to get some sleep. I had a lot of hunting to do in the morning. The morning sun hit the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office on the 45th floor, casting long shadows across my mahogany desk. To my family, I was a data entry clerk. To the partners at Sterling and Vance, I was the sharpest forensic accountant in the division, a woman who could find a missing nickel and a billion-dollar merger. I loved this office. It was quiet. It was orderly. It was everything my childhood home was not. I adjusted my silk blouse and opened a spreadsheet, ready to dive into a complex tax evasion case involving a pharmaceutical giant. I took a sip of my black coffee, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. For a moment, I felt safe. Then my phone vibrated against the glass desktop. It was a short, sharp buzz. Then another. Then a continuous stream of vibrations that sounded like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. I glanced at the screen. It was the family group chat. The one I had muted a year ago but never left because I needed to keep an eye on them like a zookeeper watching the lions. Notification after notification rolled in. Auntie Sarah, Cousin Malcolm, Deacon Jones, people I had not spoken to since Christmas were suddenly very interested in my life. I picked up the phone, my stomach tightening. I opened the Facebook app first, knowing exactly where the poison was coming from. There it was, posted at 6 a.m. A photo of my mother Lorraine sitting at her kitchen table, looking disheveled and teary-eyed, holding a Bible. The caption was an essay, a manifesto of victimhood. The post read, "Lord, give me strength, for the enemy is not at the gate, he is in the house." I never thought I would see the day when my own flesh and blood would turn on us. We raised her. We sacrificed for her. We gave her the best education while we went without. And how does she repay us? By sabotaging her brother's future. By calling the police on her own father. By stealing our joy and humiliating us before the world. Typical crab in a bucket mentality. She cannot stand to see her brother rise, so she drags us all down. Please pray for my husband Vernon, who is suffering from heart palpitations due to the stress caused by his ungrateful daughter Jada. Satan is busy, but we are blessed. She had tagged everyone, the pastor, the entire deacon board, my old high school teachers, even the lady who made the potato salad for the church picnics. She wanted to make sure that in our tight-knit community, I was marked. I was the villain. I scrolled down to the comments. They were nauseating. Auntie Sarah wrote shame on her, Lorraine. You did your best. Some apples just rot on the branch. Cousin Malcolm, who had borrowed $500 from me 2 years ago and never paid it back, wrote, that is messed up, Auntie. She always thought she was better than us. A woman from the choir wrote, praying for you, sis. Ungrateful children are a curse. I put the phone down. My hands were trembling slightly. Not from sadness, but from rage. She had weaponized the church against me. She had taken a story about them stealing $10,000 from me and twisted it until I was the abuser. She mentioned my father's heart palpitations. That was a nice touch. Vernon had the heart of an ox, but he knew how to play the frail elder when it suited him. I was about to close the app when my work email pinged. It was a high-priority notification. I frowned. It was only 9 a.m. Usually the urgent emails did not start until after lunch. I clicked on it. It was from the executive assistant to Mr. Sterling, the senior partner of the firm. Subject: meeting request, immediate message. Miss Jada, please come to Mr. Sterling's office immediately. Bring your laptop. My blood ran cold. Mr. Sterling never called junior associates directly. He certainly never called for immediate meetings without an agenda. I looked at my phone again. Had someone sent the Facebook post to my boss? No. That was impossible. My family did not know where I worked. They knew I worked downtown, but I had never told them the name of the firm specifically to avoid situations like this. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I walked down the long corridor of the firm, passing the glass-walled conference rooms. My colleagues nodded at me as I passed, but I felt like everyone was staring. Did they know? Had the rumor mill started already? I arrived at Mr. Sterling's office. His assistant, a stern woman named Martha, looked at me over her glasses. Go right in, Jada. He is waiting. I opened the heavy oak door. Mr. Sterling was standing by the window looking out at Lake Michigan. He was a man of few words, a legend in the forensic accounting world. He turned when I entered, holding a piece of paper. Sit down, Jada, he said, his voice unreadable. I sat, keeping my back straight. I ran through the list of my current cases. Had I made a mistake? Had I missed a deadline? We received an interesting email this morning. Jada, Mr. Sterling said, placing the paper in front of me last. It was sent to the General Ethics Hotline, but because of the severity of the allegations, it was flagged directly to me. I looked at the paper. It was a printout of an email from an address like justice4all123@gmail.com. The subject line read, Fraud Alert, Employee Jada. The text was riddled with grammatical errors and capitalized words to whom it may concern. You have an employee named Jada working for you. You need to investigate her immediately. She is a thief. She steals from her own family. So imagine what she is doing to your clients. She has a history of mental instability and lies about her finances. She is currently under investigation by the police for domestic abuse against her elderly father. She is not who she says she is. Fire her before she steals your money to a concerned citizen. I read it twice. The room spun. It was Trayvon. The phrasing. The bad grammar. The accusation of domestic abuse, which was a twisted reference to me dodging my father's slap last night. It was all him. He had found out where I worked, probably by looking at my LinkedIn profile, which I thought I had blocked him from. But he must have used a fake account. He was trying to get me fired. He knew that a forensic accountant needed a pristine reputation. An accusation of theft or police investigation could lead to an immediate suspension pending review. He wanted to cut off my income. He wanted to break me. I looked up at Mr. Sterling, waiting for the axe to fall. I prepared my defense. I prepared to tell him about the credit card, the assault, everything. Mr. Sterling leaned back in his leather chair and took off his glasses. He looked at the email. Then he looked at me. And then he smiled. Do you know what the first rule of forensic accounting is? Jada, he asked. Follow the digital footprint, I whispered. Exactly. Mr. Sterling tapped the paper. This email was sent anonymously. Or so the sender thought. But as you know, our firm's firewall automatically traces the IP address of all incoming external complaints to assess credibility. He slid a second piece of paper across the desk. It was a technical report. It showed the origin of the email. IP address 192.168.1.145. Internet service provider Comcast Xfinity. Registered subscriber Vernon and Lorraine Washington. Address 452 Maple Avenue, Oak Park, Illinois. Mr. Sterling raised an eyebrow. Unless I am mistaken, Jada, that is the address listed in your HR file as your emergency contact, your parents' home. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. Yes, sir. That is my parents' house. Mr. Sterling shook his head, a look of disgust crossing his face. I have seen corporate espionage, Jada. I have seen partners stab each other in the back for a bonus. But I have never seen a family try to destroy their own daughter's career with such clumsiness. He stood up and walked over to the shredder in the corner. He took the email from my hand and fed it into the machine. The loud whirring sound was the sweetest music I had ever heard. We do not tolerate slander here, Jada, he said over the noise. And we certainly do not take advice from people who use capital letters for emphasis. You are the best forensic accountant I have. Your integrity is not in question. Thank you, sir. I said, my voice thick with emotion. You have no idea what that means to me. However, Mr. Sterling continued, sitting back down on the edge of his desk. It is clear that you are dealing with a significant personal crisis. A crisis that has now attempted to breach the walls of this firm. I can handle it, sir, I said quickly. It won't happen again. I know you can handle it, Jada, but you should not have to handle it while worrying about spreadsheets. He picked up a file folder. You have accrued 6 weeks of paid vacation time that you never use. I am putting you on mandatory leave effectively immediately. I started to protest. Sir, I cannot leave the pharmaceutical case. The case can wait. Your war cannot. Mr. Sterling looked me in the eyes. Jada, these people, whoever they are to you, they are not playing games. They just tried to take your livelihood. If they are willing to do that, they are hiding something. Something they are afraid you will find with that paycheck of yours. He handed me the file. Go home. Take a week. Take 2. Use the skills we taught you. Follow the money. Find the leverage. And do not come back until you have cleaned house. Do you understand me? I stood up slowly, taking the file. I looked at this man, my boss, who had shown me more loyalty in 5 minutes than my blood relatives had shown me in 30 years. Yes, sir. I understand. Good. And Jada, if you need a good lawyer for anything civil, let me know. I know a few sharks who owe me favors. I walked out of his office feeling lightheaded. I was not fired. I was armed. My family had tried to nuke my career, and instead, they had just freed up my schedule. I went back to my desk and packed my laptop. I put an out-of-office reply on my email. I am currently away on personal business. I will be unreachable. I walked out of the building and into the bright Chicago sunlight. I checked my phone again. The hate messages were still rolling in. My mother had posted a second update claiming I had hacked her account to make her look bad. I hailed a taxi. To City Hall, I told the driver. Trevon wanted a war. He wanted to talk about investigations. He wanted to talk about theft. Fine. I had the next 14 days completely free. I was going to the Hall of Records. I was going to pull every single document with the name Washington on it. I was going to look at mortgages, liens, loans, and tax filings. Mr. Sterling was right. They were desperate. You do not try to get someone fired unless you are terrified of what they might buy or what they might see. I took out my phone and sent one text message, not to my family, but to my assistant. Please cancel my gym membership for the month. I won't be needing to box. I have a new target. The taxi merged into traffic. The sadness was gone. The shock was gone. All that was left was the cold calculation of a forensic auditor looking at a balance sheet that did not add up. They wanted the accountant. They were about to get the auditor, and I was going to audit their entire lives down to the last penny. The Cook County Recorder of Deeds is a building that smells of old paper dust and bureaucratic indifference. It is a place where dreams are filed away in manila folders, and where secrets go to hide in plain sight. Most people think that secrets are kept in whispers or locked diaries, but I know better. Secrets are kept in public records. They are hidden in the fine print of property liens, and the notarized signatures of loan documents. Anyone can find them if they know where to look, and I knew exactly where to look. I walked through the heavy revolving doors, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. I was no longer Jada the daughter. I was Jada the auditor, the emotional part of my brain, the part that wanted to curl up and cry because my father had tried to slap me had been shut down. In its place was the cold calculating machine that Sterling and Vance paid me a fortune to operate. I approached the clerk's window. The woman behind the glass looked tired, surrounded by stacks of files. She did not look up when I approached. I need to pull the property records for 452 Maple Avenue. I said, my voice steady. I need the full history. Deeds, mortgages, liens and releases. The clerk sighed, pushing her glasses up her nose. Are you the homeowner? I am a party of interest, I said, handing over my ID and the request form I had filled out in the lobby. And I am willing to pay the expedited fee for certified copies. That got her attention. She took the form and typed the address into her computer. The machine whirred and groaned. I waited, my hands clasped behind my back. I looked around the room. There were couples there, holding hands, looking up their first home purchase. There were developers looking for land to flip. They all looked hopeful. I wondered if they knew that a house was not just a home. It was a leverageable asset. It was a piggy bank that could be smashed open. Here we go, the clerk said. She printed out a summary sheet and walked back into the archives. 5 minutes later, she returned with a thick file folder. You can view them at the table over there, she said. If you want copies, mark the pages. I took the file. It felt heavy in my hands. Heavier than paper should feel. I carried it to a wooden table in the corner under a flickering fluorescent light. I sat down and took a deep breath. I was about to open Pandora's box. I opened the folder. The first few documents were standard. The original deed from 30 years ago when my parents bought the house. A satisfaction of mortgage from 10 years ago when they paid off the original loan. I remembered that day. My father had thrown a barbecue to celebrate being debt-free. He had given a speech about building generational wealth. He had looked so proud. I flipped past that. Then I saw it. A document dated October 15th, 3 years ago. Mortgage deed. Lender First National Bank of Illinois. Borrower Vernon Washington and Lorraine Washington. I scanned down to the amount. My breath hitched. $150,000. They had taken out a second mortgage against the house. A home equity loan. But why? My father had a pension. My mother worked part-time. Their expenses were low. Why did they need that much cash 3 years ago? I turned the page to look at the signature block. And that was when the room stopped spinning. That was when gravity seemed to double, pulling me down into the chair. There were 3 signatures on the loan. Vernon Washington, Lorraine Washington, and Jada Washington. I stared at the name. My name. Written in blue ink. It was a good forgery. I had to give them that. They had practiced. The J had the same loop I used. The slant was almost perfect. But I knew my own hand. And I knew for a fact that on October 15th, 3 years ago, I was in London on a business trip auditing a hedge fund. I have the passport stamps to prove it. I was 4,000 miles away when this document was signed. I looked at the line below the signature. CO signer. Guarantor. They had made me a CO signer. Suddenly, the pieces of the puzzle slammed together with violent force. 3 years ago, my parents' credit scores had taken a hit because they had bought a luxury SUV they could not afford. They would not have qualified for a loan of this size on their own. They needed a third party, someone with pristine credit, someone with a high income-to-debt ratio. Me. They had used my identity to secure the loan. They had stolen my financial reputation to mortgage their house. But the horror did not stop there. A loan is just a loan until you find out where the money went. I flipped to the disbursement statement. This document showed exactly who received the cashier's check from the bank. Pay to the order of Trev Tech Solutions LLC. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to close my eyes. Trev Tech Solutions was my brother's company. The startup he claimed was the next Facebook. The startup that never launched a product, never had a client, and never made a dime. He had told everyone he had secured seed funding from an angel investor in Silicon Valley. He had bragged about it at Thanksgiving dinner that year. "I am a self-made man," he had said, popping a bottle of champagne. I went out and got the funding on my own. Lies. All lies. The angel investor was not from Silicon Valley. The angel investor was his parents' house, and his sister's stolen identity. He had burned through $150,000 in 3 years. On what? Luxury cars, designer clothes, dinners at Nobu, trips to Miami, and now trips to the Maldives. He had eaten the equity of our family home. He had swallowed his inheritance before my parents were even dead, and my parents let him. That was the part that cut the deepest. My father, the man who slapped me for disrespecting the family, had signed his name right next to the forgery of mine. He knew. He watched someone, probably my mother, fake my signature, and he signed right next to it. They had sat in a room with a notary public and lied to their face. Wait. A notary. I looked at the notary stamp at the bottom of the page. State of Illinois. Commission expires 2024. Marcus D. Henderson. Marcus. My brother's best friend since high school. The one who now worked as a loan officer at the bank. Of course. It was a conspiracy. A tight little circle of fraud. Trayvon needed money. My parents needed to give it to him, but could not qualify. Marcus needed a commission, so they all agreed to sacrifice me. They used Jada. Jada the reliable. Jada the quiet. Jada, who would never check public records because she trusted her family. They had turned me into a mule, an unwilling guarantor for their bad decisions. If they stopped paying this mortgage, the bank would not just take the house. They would come for me. They would garnish my wages. They would seize my assets. They would destroy the credit score I had spent a decade building. And since the loan was 3 years old, and they were clearly struggling, hence the foreclosure notice I had seen earlier that meant the default was already happening. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and took high-resolution photos of every page. The forgery, the disbursement, the notary stamp. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. This was not just about a vacation anymore. This was financial violence. They had put a gun to my financial head and pulled the trigger 3 years ago. I was just now hearing the bang. I stood up and walked back to the clerk. "I need certified copies of all of these," I said. "And I need a copy of the foreclosure notice that was filed last week." The clerk looked at me. She saw the look on my face. It was a look she had probably seen 1,000 times in this building. The look of someone who has just realized they have been betrayed by the people they loved most. She did not ask any questions. She just nodded and started stamping the papers. Clack, clack, clack. The sound of the stamp was like a gavel coming down. I paid the fee with my own debit card. I took the heavy envelope of certified documents. I walked out of City Hall and stood on the steps. The wind was blowing off the lake, cold and biting. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself. I had the evidence of the crime. I had the who, the what, and the where. Who my parents and brother, what bank fraud, wire fraud, forgery, and identity theft were First National Bank of Illinois. I looked at the time. It was 1 in the afternoon. The bank branch where Marcus worked was only 6 blocks away. I could go to the police right now. I had enough to have them all arrested by dinner time. But an arrest was too quick, too messy, and honestly too kind. If they went to jail, they would play the victim. They would cry about the system. They would blame me for snitching. No. I wanted something more absolute. I wanted to dismantle their lies one by one. I wanted to look Marcus in the eye and watch him crumble. I wanted to trace every single cent of that $150,000 and prove that it did not go to business expenses, but to Jessica's handbags and Trayvon's ego. I hailed a taxi. "Where to?" the driver asked. "First National Bank," I said, "and wait for me. I won't be long." I clutched the envelope against my chest. It felt like a shield. My family had tried to bury me in debt. They had tried to erase my future to pay for their better than they speak English. They forgot that numbers do not lie even if parents do. I was going to the bank, and I was going to make a withdrawal, not of money, but of the truth. Marcus Henderson was about to have the worst day of his career, and Trayvon was about to find out that his angel investor had just turned into the devil. The First National Bank of Illinois was designed to intimidate. It had marble floors that clicked loudly under your heels, and high vaulted ceilings that made you feel small. But as I walked through the revolving glass doors, I did not feel small. I felt like a predator entering a cage where the prey was already trapped. I clutched the envelope from City Hall against my chest. Inside were the certified copies of the forged mortgage deed, proving that my family had sold me out for $150,000. But a forgery was just the gun. I needed to find the bullet. I needed to know where the money went. I scanned the lobby. It was quiet for a Tuesday afternoon. In the back corner behind a desk with a fake mahogany finish, sat Marcus Henderson. Marcus had been my brother Travin's best friend since high school. They were cut from the same cloth. Both charming, both loud, and both allergic to hard work. While Travin played at being a CEO, Marcus played at being a banker. He wore a suit that was too shiny and a watch that was too big, trying to project an image of success that his commission checks could not support. I walked straight to his desk. He was busy typing on his phone, probably checking sports scores or texting Trayvon. He did not look up until I pulled the chair out and sat down. The screech of the chair legs against the floor made him jump. "Jada," he said, blinking in surprise. His smile was automatic, a practiced customer service grimace. "What are you doing here? Trayvon didn't say you were coming by." "Hello, Marcus," I said, placing the heavy envelope on his desk. "Trayvon doesn't know I am here. This is a surprise inspection." Marcus laughed nervously, leaning back in his chair. He looked at the envelope, then back at me. "Look, Jada. I heard about the airport drama. Travin told me everything. He said you were pretty upset about the credit card thing. But honestly, coming down to my job is a bit much, don't you think?" He was dismissing me. He thought I was just the angry little sister coming to vent. He thought he could handle me with the same bro code deflection he used with Trayvon. "I am not here to talk about the airport, Marcus," I said, keeping my voice low and even. "I am here to talk about the mortgage. The one you notarized 3 years ago. The one with my signature on it." Marcus's smile faltered. He shifted in his seat, adjusting his tie. "Oh, right. That. Look, Jada. That was a while ago. Your parents needed the loan to help Trayvon get off the ground. It was a family thing. I just helped push the paperwork through. You know how banks can be with red tape. I did you guys a favor." "A favor," I repeated. "You notarized a signature that wasn't mine. You looked at a woman who wasn't me, watched her sign my name, and then you stamped it with your state commission. That is not a favor, Marcus. That is a felony." He waved his hand dismissively. "Come on, Jada. Don't use words like that. Your dad said you were on board. He said you were just too busy to come in person, so your mom signed for you as your proxy. It happens all the time in family businesses. Don't make it weird. Just go home, talk to Trayvon, and let them pay you back when the startup takes off." He was gaslighting me. He was sitting there in his cheap suit telling me that stealing my identity was standard operating procedure. He treated the law like it was a suggestion. I leaned forward. "I want the loan file, Marcus. I want to see the application, and I want the transaction history for the disbursement account." Marcus let out an exaggerated sigh. "Jada, I can't just give you that. That is confidential client information. Trayvon is the primary account holder on the business account. You are just a CO signer. Technically, I shouldn't even be talking to you without him present. Go home, Jada. Stop being dramatic." That was the word that did it. Dramatic. It was the same word my father used, the same word Trayvon used. They all thought that a woman demanding justice was just being emotional. I reached into my purse. I did not pull out a tissue. I did not pull out a phone. I pulled out a phone until it hit his hand. He looked down at it. Sterling and Vance LLP, Jada Washington, Senior Forensic Accountant, Certified Fraud Examiner. He frowned, looking up at me with confusion. "I thought you were a data entry clerk. Trayvon said you worked in admin." "Trayvon is an idiot," I said, cold as ice. "And apparently so are you. Do you know what a forensic accountant does, Marcus?" He didn't answer. He just stared at the card. I hunt people who steal money. I continued, my voice sharpening. I trace assets for the FBI, for the IRS, and for Fortune 500 companies. I put bad guys in prison, Marcus, real prison, not the ones you see on TV. I reached into the envelope and pulled out a draft of a document I had typed up that morning. It was a formal complaint addressed to the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation and the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. This is a draft, Marcus, I said, tapping the paper. It outlines a conspiracy to commit bank fraud involving a loan officer who knowingly notarized a forged signature. Do you know the penalty for bank fraud under 18 U.S. Code Section 1344? Marcus swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. It is up to 30 years in federal prison, I said, answering my own question. And a fine of up to $1 million. Now, I know you don't have $1 million, Marcus, and I know you wouldn't last 30 days in prison, let alone 30 years. He was sweating now, visible beads of perspiration forming on his forehead. He looked around the lobby, terrified that his manager might be watching. Jada. Please, he whispered. His arrogance completely gone. I didn't know. I mean, I knew it wasn't you signing, but your dad swore it was okay. He said you authorized it verbally. I was just trying to help Trayvon. He's my boy. Is he your boy enough to go to jail for him? I asked. Because that is where you are headed. Unless what? He asked, his voice trembling. Unless you give me the statements, I said. Right now. I want to see where that $150,000 went. If you give me the evidence, I might leave your name out of the initial report. I might tell the feds you were a victim of their deception too. But if you protect him, Marcus, I will bury you right next to him. He looked at me. He looked at the complaint draft. He looked at his future crumbling before his eyes. It took him exactly 3 seconds to decide that loyalty to Trayvon was not worth his freedom. He turned to his computer. His hands were shaking so badly, he had to type his password twice. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I am printing it. Just don't send that letter, Jada. Please. I have a kid on the way. I didn't care about his kid. He didn't care about my credit score when he ruined it. I just waited. The printer behind him whirred to life. It spat out page after page of transaction history. Marcus grabbed the stack of warm paper and slid it across the desk to me like it was contraband. I picked it up. This was it. The truth. Trayvon had claimed this money was for servers, for coding, for marketing. He claimed he was building the next tech empire. I scanned the first page. October 18th. Disbursement received $150,000. October 20th. Withdrawal $5,000. DraftKings Sportsbook. October 22nd. POS transaction $3,200. Gucci Chicago. October 2005. Withdrawal $2,000. Horseshoe Casino Hammond. My eyes widened. There was no business. There were no servers. There was no office rent. I flipped the page. November 5th. Payment $1,200. BMW Financial Services. November 10th. POS transaction $4,500. Balenciaga. November 15th. Transfer to J. Miller. $2,000. J. Miller. That was Jessica's maiden name. He was transferring money directly to his girlfriend. I kept reading. It was a catalog of hedonism, VIP tables at nightclubs, online gambling losses, designer handbags, leased luxury cars. They had blown through $150,000 in less than 18 months. Not a single cent had gone into an investment. They had eaten my future. They had drunk it in champagne bottles and worn it on their feet. I felt a cold fury unlike anything I had ever experienced. I wasn't just angry. I was disgusted. My parents were losing their home because Trayvon wanted to look rich, and they had let him do it. I looked up at Marcus. He was watching me terrified. Did you know? I asked, holding up the statements. Did you know he was spending the loan money on gambling and clothes? Marcus looked down. I saw him pull up in the new BMW a few years ago. I figured business was good. I didn't ask questions, Jada. I just did the loan. You didn't ask questions, I repeated, standing up. Well, the FBI asks a lot of questions, Marcus. You better get your answers ready. I took the papers and the envelope. I had everything I needed. I had the forgery. I had the accomplice. And now I had the paper trail of the embezzlement. Wait, Jada, Marcus pleaded, standing up. You said if I gave you the papers, you wouldn't report me. I paused and looked back at him. I lied. Consider it a lesson in trust. I walked out of the bank. The air outside felt cleaner than the air inside. I hailed my taxi, which was still waiting at the curb. Where to now, miss? The driver asked, eyeing the thick stack of papers in my hand. I looked at the statements again. The payments to Jessica, the gambling debts, the lies. Take me to a private investigator's office, I said. I need to dig into Jessica Miller's background. If she was taking transfers from the stolen money, I want to know exactly what debt she was paying off. The driver nodded and pulled into traffic. I leaned back in the seat. My family thought I was playing checkers. They thought I would just yell and scream and maybe sue for the money back. They didn't realize I was playing chess. And I had just captured their knight. Next I was coming for the queen, Jessica Miller, the woman who called me you people, the woman who spent my stolen money on Balenciaga while I drove a Honda. It was time to find out who she really was. Because people who marry thieves are usually thieves themselves. And I was about to turn her life inside out. The office of private investigator David Chen was not in a dark alley like in the movies. It was in a glass high-rise in the Loop, only 3 blocks from my own office. David was a former forensic auditor who had gotten bored with spreadsheets and decided he preferred digging through trash and surveillance footage. He was expensive, discreet, and terrifyingly efficient. I sat across from him watching as he slid a thick manila envelope across the polished oak desk. The air conditioning in the building hummed a low, constant sound that usually calmed me, but today my heart was racing against it. I had spent the last 3 years watching my sister-in-law Jessica look down her nose at my family. She treated us like a charity project she had graciously decided to adopt. She spoke about her family's estate in Connecticut, with a misty-eyed nostalgia that made my mother Lorraine swoon. According to Jessica, she came from old money, the kind of money that didn't need to shout. She talked about summers at the vineyard and winter break skiing in Aspen. She critiqued my brother Trayvon worshipped her. He acted like he had won the lottery by marrying a white woman with a pedigree. He thought she was his ticket into the upper echelons of society. David cleared his throat, bringing me back to the present. You are going to want to sit back for this, Jada. It is quite a story. I opened the envelope. The first photograph was not of a vineyard or a horse farm. It was a picture of a dilapidated single-story house with peeling siding and a chain-link fence. There was a rusted pickup truck on the lawn up on blocks. What is this? I asked. That, David said, is the ancestral estate in Connecticut, or rather, Bridgeport, Connecticut. It is a rental. Section 8 housing. I stared at the photo, but she said her father was a retired investment banker. She said he breeds thoroughbreds. David clicked his mouse and projected a document onto the wall screen. It was a bankruptcy filing from 10 years ago. Her father is Richard Miller. He was never an investment banker. He was a shift manager at a warehouse who got laid off in 2012. He filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy shortly after. He currently lives on disability checks and state assistance. There are no horses, Jada, unless you count the ones on the television when he watches the races. I felt the room tilt. Every story she had told us. Every time she had rolled her eyes at my father's choice of wine. Every time she had sighed about missing the country club. It was all a performance. A lie so audacious that we never thought to question it, because who lies about something that big? But why, I whispered. Why marry Trayvon? My family is middle class, sure. But we aren't rich. Not the kind of rich she was pretending to be. David smirked. That is the best part. Or the saddest, depending on how you look at it. Jessica didn't know you weren't rich. Think about it, Jada. Your mother, Lorraine. My mother, the woman who leased cars she couldn't afford and wore fake furs to church. My mother who bragged to anyone who would listen about her son, the tech CEO, and her husband, the illustrious principal. When Jessica met Trayvon, David explained, she saw the flash. She saw the leased BMW. She heard your mother's exaggerated stories about family wealth. She thought she had hooked a whale. She thought she was marrying into a wealthy, successful black family that would solve all her financial problems. I started to laugh. It bubbled up from my chest. So you are telling me, I said, wiping a tear from my eye, that we have two gold diggers who dug into each other. Trayvon married her because he thought she was rich, and she married him because she thought he was rich. Exactly, David said. It is a double con. Two drowning people grabbing onto each other and calling it a rescue mission. But here is where it gets criminal, Jada. He flipped to the next section of the dossier. Jessica isn't just poor. She is in deep. I looked at the credit report he had pulled. It was a disaster. Red ink everywhere. But one section stood out. Online gambling debts. DraftKings. FanDuel. BetMGM. Wait, I said. I saw these names on the bank statement for the stolen loan money. I assumed it was Trayvon. He loves sports. David shook his head. Trayvon likes to watch sports. Jessica likes to bet on them. And she is bad at it. Very bad. Before she met your brother, she was in debt to some very unfriendly people in New Jersey. She came to Chicago to start over, but she brought her addiction with her. I looked at the numbers. $50,000 in losses in 1 year. She has been bleeding him dry. David continued. She has been pressuring Trayvon to come up with cash to pay off her bookies and her credit cards. She threatens to leave him if he doesn't provide the lifestyle she deserves. She plays on his insecurity. She tells him that her father is suspicious that he isn't a good provider. She gaslights him into stealing. I thought back to the hospital. The way Jessica had looked at my apartment and called it a shame. The way she had sneered you people. She wasn't looking down on us because she was better. She was looking down on us because she needed to maintain the illusion of superiority to keep the con going. She was projecting her own poverty onto me. The $150,000 my parents borrowed against their house. The $10,000 on my credit card. It wasn't just for luxury bags. It was to feed the beast. It was to keep the house of cards from collapsing. David pointed to a specific transaction on the bank statement I had brought him. See this transfer here. $2,000 to a J. Miller. That is her father. Richard? She sends him a stipend every month to keep him quiet. To keep him from showing up in his rusted truck and ruining the fantasy. I felt a surge of disgust. My parents were losing their home. My father was risking a heart attack. I had almost lost my job. All to subsidize a woman who hated us. A woman who called us you people, while spending our money to pay for her father's beer and her own gambling addiction. Does Trayvon know? I asked. David shrugged. He has to know she isn't rich by now. But he is stuck. If he exposes her, he admits he was played. And you know your brother Jada. His ego is bigger than his bank account. He would rather steal from his parents and pretend his wife is an heiress than admit he married a fraud from a trailer park. I stood up and walked to the window looking out at the city. The anger I felt before was hot and explosive. This anger was cold. It was steel. They deserve each other, I said softly. Yes, David agreed. But your parents are the collateral damage. And you. I turned back to him. Not anymore. I picked up the photos of the dilapidated house in Bridgeport. I picked up the bankruptcy filings. I picked up the gambling records. I need one more thing, I said. Name it, David replied. I need her current location. Not where she says she is. Where she actually is. She is at the spa, David said, checking his phone. The one at the Four Seasons she checked in 2 hours ago. Posted a picture on Instagram captioned, "Much needed relaxation after the family drama." I looked at the time. It was 4 p.m. Send me the bill, David. You are worth every penny. I gathered the files. My hands were steady. I walked out of the office and hailed a cab. But I wasn't going to the Four Seasons. Not yet. I had a dinner to attend. A dinner that my mother had begged me to come to. The reconciliation dinner. The trap. They wanted me to come over so they could guilt me into signing the papers to cover their theft. They wanted to present a united front. Jessica would be there sipping wine and talking about how her father was considering buying a boat. I smiled in the back seat of the cab. I couldn't wait to hear about the boat. I couldn't wait to hear about the horses. Because tonight I wasn't bringing wine. I was bringing reality. I pulled out my phone and looked at the picture of the trailer park one more time. You people. She had said. Well, tonight, you people were going to introduce her to herself. The cab driver looked in the rearview mirror. You okay, miss? You look like you are about to go into battle. I am, I said, smoothing my skirt. But don't worry. I have already won. I am just going to deliver the surrender terms. The realization that my entire family struggle was funded by a lie was liberating. I didn't have to feel bad for them anymore. I didn't have to wonder if I was being too harsh. They were parasites feeding on a host that was already dead. Jessica Miller wanted to live a high-maintenance life on a working-class budget. She wanted to be a princess. I was about to turn her into a pumpkin, and Trayvon, my brother, the golden child. He was just a pawn, a fool who let a woman with a fake accent rob his parents blind because he was too insecure to ask to see a bank statement. The tragic comedy of it all would be funny if it hadn't cost me so much. But the cost was paid. Now it was time for the refund. I closed my eyes and visualized the dinner table. I visualized Jessica's face. I visualized the moment I would lay the photo of the trailer on the table next to the roast chicken. It was going to be the most expensive dinner they never paid for. The phone rang at 6 in the evening, just as I was stepping out of the shower. I looked at the screen and saw my mother's name. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. I considered blocking her just like I had blocked the others, but curiosity is a dangerous thing, and I wanted to hear the pitch. I wanted to hear what the next move was in their desperate game of chess. I answered the phone and put it on speaker while I dried my hair. Jada. Her voice was wet and thick with tears. It was a performance I had heard 1,000 times before. It was the voice she used when she wanted a discount at the grocery store or when she wanted to get out of a speeding ticket. Jada, baby, please don't hang up. I am listening, Mom. I said calmly. We cannot leave things like this. She sobbed. Your father is a wreck. He has not eaten since yesterday. He is just sitting in his study staring at the wall. We are a family, Jada. Families fight. Families scream, but families do not destroy each other. Please, come for dinner. Just a quiet dinner. No shouting. No accusations. Just us. We made a roast chicken, your favorite. Please, baby. Just give us a chance to apologize. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were clear. My expression was hard. I knew exactly what this was. It was not an apology. It was an ambush. They had realized that intimidation did not work, so now they were pivoting to manipulation. They needed something from me, and they needed it fast because the bank was closing in. Okay, Mom. I said I will come over 7 o'clock. Thank you, Jesus, she whispered. Thank you, Jada. See you soon. I hung up and walked into my bedroom. I did not put on a dress. I did not put on heels. I put on a pair of dark jeans and a black turtleneck, and then I opened my jewelry box. Inside, hidden beneath the velvet tray, was a small device. It looked like a sleek modern brooch, a simple silver bar that pinned to a lapel. But it was a high-fidelity digital recorder with a 12-hour battery life. I pinned it to my collar. I tapped it once to ensure the tiny blue light blinked, and then faded to nothing, indicating it was recording. I was walking into the lion's den, but this time I was not the prey. I was the hunter wearing a wire. When I pulled up to my parents' house in Oak Park, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. The grass was overgrown. The hedges were untrimmed. It was subtle, but once you noticed it, you could see the neglect. They were so focused on maintaining the illusion of wealth inside, that the outside was starting to crumble. I walked up the driveway past my father's Lexus. I noticed the tires were bald. Another sign. My mother opened the door before I could even knock. She was wearing an apron over her church dress, and her face was freshly powdered to hide the blotchiness from her crying. She pulled me into a hug that felt desperate and suffocating. She smelled of lavender and fear. I am so glad you are here, she whispered. Come in. Everyone is waiting. I walked into the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the stuff we usually only used for Thanksgiving. There were candles lit. It looked like a scene from a magazine. My father Vernon sat at the head of the table. He stood up when I entered. He looked older than he had 2 days ago. His shoulders were slumped and his eyes were darting around the room, avoiding mine. Hello, Jada, he grunted. Thank you for coming. Trayvon and Jessica were seated on the side. Trayvon looked like a sullen teenager who had been forced to attend Sunday school. Jessica, however, was beaming. She was wearing a white dress that looked very expensive and very out of place for a Tuesday night family dinner. Hi, Jada, she chirped. We missed you. I sat down at the empty seat opposite them. The recorder on my collar felt heavy against my skin. Let us eat, my mother said quickly, bringing out a platter of roast chicken and potatoes. The first 20 minutes were excruciating. We talked about the weather. We talked about the neighbors. We talked about everything except the elephant in the room. They were trying to soften me up. They were trying to remind me of the good times. My mother brought up a story about how I won the spelling bee in 3rd grade. My father chuckled at the appropriate moments. Jessica played her part perfectly. She poured wine and laughed at jokes that weren't funny. She talked about her charity work. She talked about how exhausting it was to manage her social calendar. My father is thinking of buying a boat, she said, casually twirling her fork. He wants a yacht, actually, but Mom says a catamaran is more practical for the sound. He is so funny. He just called me yesterday asking if Trevin and I wanted to fly out to see it. I took a sip of water to hide my smile. I thought about the photo in my purse. The photo of the rusted truck on blocks in front of the shack in Bridgeport. Her father was not buying a yacht. He was probably struggling to buy groceries. But she lied so easily. It was effortless for her. Finally, the plates were cleared. My father cleared his throat. He put his hands on the table and looked at me. The air in the room shifted. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jada, he began, his voice grave. We brought you here because we want to fix this. We know we hurt you. We know we made mistakes with the credit card. You stole $10,000, Dad. I said simply, yes, my mother interrupted, reaching for my hand. And we are sorry. It was a lapse in judgment. We were desperate to keep up appearances and we made a mistake. But we are a family, and families fix each other's mistakes. Vernon reached under the table and pulled out a leather portfolio. He unzipped it slowly. We have a solution, Jada, he said. A way to make everything right. A way to protect everyone. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was typed on thick legal bond paper. I looked down at it. Retroactive promissory note and debt acknowledgement. I read the first paragraph. I, Jada Washington, hereby acknowledge that I authorized my parents Vernon and Lorraine Washington to act as my agents in securing a home equity line of credit in the amount of $150,000 on October 15, 3 years ago. I acknowledge that the signature on said documents was placed there with my verbal consent. I looked up. My heart was pounding against the recorder. You want me to sign this? I asked. It is just a formality, Trevon said, leaning forward. His eyes were wide and desperate. Look, Jada. The bank is asking questions because of the missed payments. They are threatening an audit of the original loan file. If they look too closely, they might see that the signature looks a little different. A little different, I repeated. You mean, forged? If you sign this paper, my father said, his voice hardening slightly. It validates the loan. It tells the bank that you knew about it all along. It stops the investigation. It saves the house, Jada. If you don't sign this, they will foreclose, and they might charge us with fraud. You don't want to see your father in jail, do you? I looked at the paper again. If I sign this, I would be accepting liability for the debt. I would be on the hook for $150,000 plus interest, and I would be admitting that I lied to the bank. I would be destroying my own career to save them. But you owe $150,000, I said. Even if I sign this, how are you going to pay it back? The money is gone, Trevon. You spent on gambling and cars. That is where you are wrong, Trevon said quickly. The startup is about to pop, Jada. We are closing our series of funding next month. I have investors lined up. Once that money hits, I will pay off the whole loan. I will pay you back for the plane tickets too. Everything. He was lying. I knew he was lying. There were no investors. And then Jessica made her move. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Her skin was soft. Her manicure perfect. She looked me in the eyes with that blue-eyed sincerity that had fooled my brother for years. Jada, listen to me, she said softly. I haven't told Trevon this yet because I wanted it to be a surprise. But I spoke to my father this morning. I raised an eyebrow. Richard? The man in the trailer park. Yes, Jessica continued. He is so impressed with Trevon's vision. He has agreed to liquidate some of his portfolio. He is going to inject $200,000 into the company next week. My mother gasped. Oh, Jessica, really? That is a miracle. Jessica smiled at her, then turned back to me. It is true. So you see, Jada, you are not taking a risk. My family has the money. We are going to cover everything. In fact, if you sign this paper tonight and save the house, I will make sure Trevon pays you double. $300,000. Consider it a return on your investment for being a good sister. I stared at her. It was breathtaking. She was doubling down on the con. She was using a non-existent fortune to bribe me into signing a fraudulent document. She was willing to destroy my financial life to keep her own lies afloat for just one more week. And my parents, they were looking at her like she was the Messiah. They believed her. Or they wanted to believe her so badly that they had turned off their brains. They were willing to sacrifice their own daughter based on the promise of a woman who was currently paying her father hush money to stay in Connecticut. The room was silent. They were all watching me, waiting for me to pick up the pen. Jada, my father said, pushing the pen toward me. Do the right thing. Be a Washington. Protect this family. I looked at the pen. It was a Mont Blanc, probably bought with the stolen money. I reached out and touched the paper. I could feel the texture of the lie. If I sign this, I said slowly, making sure my voice was clear for the microphone, I become liable for the debt. And I admit to a crime I didn't commit. It is not a crime if we agree on it, my mother pleaded. It is just paper. Jada, just paper. I looked at Jessica. You promise your father is sending the money next week. I swear on my life, Jessica said without blinking. The wire transfer is set up. I sat back in my chair. I had it. I had the coercion. I had the admission of the forgery. I had the conspiracy to commit further fraud. And I had Jessica's lie recorded in high-definition audio. I picked up the pen. My father exhaled a breath he had been holding. Trevon grinned. Jessica squeezed my hand tighter. I held the pen over the signature line. Then I put the cap back on. I stood up. I'm not going to sign this, I said. The air left the room. What Vernon snapped. I said I am not signing it. I am not going to validate your fraud. And I am certainly not going to bet my future on Jessica's imaginary inheritance. Imaginary Jessica shouted, standing up, her chair scraping against the floor. How dare you? I looked at her. I looked at the fear behind her eyes. She knew that I saw something, but she didn't know how much. I am leaving, I said. And Dad, if I were you, I would start packing. Because without this signature, that foreclosure is going to happen very fast. You walk out that door, Jada, my father yelled, slamming his fist on the table, and you are dead to us. You hear me? Dead? I looked at them one last time. The roast chicken was cold. The candles had burned down. The illusion was broken. I touched the brooch on my collar. Goodbye, I said. I walked out of the dining room. I walked out of the house. I walked down the driveway past the bald tires and the overgrown grass. I got into my car and locked the doors. Only then did I reach up and stop the recording. I sat there in the dark for a moment, listening to the silence. My heart was breaking for the little girl who used to live in that house, who just wanted her parents to love her. But the woman I was now knew better. They didn't want a daughter. They wanted a cosigner. I started the engine. I had the evidence. Now it was time to drop the hammer. I drove toward the highway. My next stop was not home. My next stop was the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The dinner was over, but the reckoning had just begun. The sound of paper tearing is distinct. It is a sharp final sound that cannot be unheard. I picked up the fraudulent promissory note, the document that would have enslaved me to my family's debt, and I ripped it down the middle. Then I ripped it again and again until the lies were nothing but confetti raining down onto the cold roast chicken. My father Vernon stared at the pieces of paper as if I had just torn off his own limb. His face turned a dangerous shade of gray. My mother Lorraine let out a gasp that sounded more like a shriek. You just signed our death warrant, Jada. My father whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. You just took the roof from over our heads. No, Dad, I said, standing firm. You took the roof. You and Trevon. And by the way, since we are putting everything on the table, let us talk about your retirement fund. Vernon froze. His eyes darted to my mother, who looked confused. What are you talking about? Lorraine asked, looking between us. Vernon has a full pension. We are set for life. I laughed. It was a cold sound. Mom, there is no pension. I checked the public filings. Dad cashed out the entire principal balance 6 months ago. The penalty alone was 40%. Lorraine turned to her husband slowly. Vernon, tell me she is lying. Tell me our retirement is safe. Vernon couldn't speak. He opened his mouth, but only a wheezing sound came out. He clutched his chest, his fingers digging into his shirt. Stop it, Jada, Trayvon yelled, slamming his hand on the table. Stop lying. You are upsetting him. I am not lying, I said, pointing at my father. Look at him. He gave you that money, Trayvon. He liquidated his future to pay for your fake startup. And now you have nothing, no house, no pension, and no daughter to bail you out. Vernon tried to stand up. He swayed on his feet. His face was no longer gray. It was ash white. He reached out a hand toward me, maybe to hit me again, maybe to beg I would never know. Jada, he gasped. Then his eyes rolled back in his head. He collapsed. He didn't fall like they do in the movies. It was heavy and clumsy. He hit the edge of the table on the way down, taking the wine glasses with him. They shattered on the floor, mixing red wine with the white carpet. Vernon Lorraine screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. She shook him violently. Vernon, get up. Don't do this. Trayvon stood frozen. Jessica backed away, covering her mouth, looking more worried about the wine splashing on her dress than the man on the floor. I stood there for a second, paralyzed. Part of me thought it was another act, another manipulation tactic. But then I saw his chest. It wasn't moving. Call 911, I commanded. My voice was the only steady thing in the room. Trayvon fumbled with his phone, dropping it twice. I shoved him aside and dialed the number myself. My father is having a cardiac event, I told the operator. 58 years old, history of hypertension, he is unconscious. As I gave the address, I watched my family. My mother was wailing, praying in tongues. Trayvon was pacing, muttering to himself. Jessica was texting, probably her father or her bookie. I knelt down beside my father. I checked for a pulse. It was faint and thready. I hated him in that moment, but I also didn't want him to die on the floor surrounded by lies. The paramedics arrived in 6 minutes. They were efficient and loud, filling the house with static from their radios. They cut open his shirt. They put pads on his chest. Clear, one shouted. His body jolted. We have a rhythm, the medic said. Get him in the rig. As they wheeled him out, Trayvon turned on me. His face was wet with tears and snot, but his eyes were full of venom. Are you happy now? He screamed, pushing me hard against the wall. You did this. You caused the stress. If he dies, Jada, it is on you. You killed him. I pushed him off me. I didn't say a word. I just walked past him, out the door and to my car. I followed the ambulance to the hospital. The emergency waiting room was a special kind of purgatory. Fluorescent lights, vending machines that hummed too loudly, and the smell of antiseptic masking the smell of fear. My mother sat in the corner holding Trayvon's hand, crying softly. Jessica sat a few seats away, scrolling on her phone, looking bored. I sat alone. I was the villain here. I could feel their eyes on me. They had already rewritten the narrative. Jada, the heartless daughter who stressed her father into a heart attack over money. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, a doctor in blue scrubs came out. He looked tired. He scanned the room. Family of Vernon Washington. We all stood up. My mother rushed forward. Is he okay? Is he alive? He is stable, the doctor said. It was a massive myocardial infarction. We managed to place a stent to clear the blockage, but he is very weak. Thank you, Jesus. My mother sobbed, clinging to Trayvon. The doctor looked at her, then he looked at me. He seemed to sense who was actually listening to the details. He walked over to me. Are you the daughter? He asked. I nodded. Yes, I am Jada. Can I speak with you privately for a moment? The doctor glanced at my mother, who was too busy praising God to notice. I followed him to a quiet corner of the hallway away from the family. What is it, doctor? I asked. Is it worse than you said? The doctor sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. Physically, he will recover if he takes care of himself. But Jada, There is something you need to know. We ran a standard toxicology panel to see what medications were in his system, and I asked. He has 0 beta blockers in his blood, no statins, no blood pressure medication, nothing. His chart says he has been prescribed a heavy regimen for his heart condition, but based on his blood work, he hasn't taken a single pill in at least 3 months. I frowned. That doesn't make sense. My dad is a hypochondriac. He never misses a dose. He has a pill organizer the size of a briefcase. That is what I thought too, the doctor said. So I checked his insurance file to see if there were issues with the pharmacy approvals. Jada, his insurance was canceled 90 days ago for non-payment. The world stopped. Canceled, I repeated. But he has premium insurance. It is auto-deducted from his account. Apparently not, the doctor said. We tried to run his coverage tonight for the surgery, and it came back terminated. The billing department notes say the premiums were unpaid for 3 consecutive months. The pharmacy stopped filling his prescriptions because he couldn't pay the out-of-pocket cost without coverage. I felt sick. Physically sick. My father, the man who cared more about his image than anything else, had stopped taking his life-saving heart medication because he couldn't afford it. And he couldn't afford it because his pension was gone. But where did the insurance money go? I thanked the doctor and walked away. My mind was racing. I went back to the mental spreadsheet of the bank records I had seen earlier that day. The one Marcus had given me. There was a recurring withdrawal, $1,200 a month. It was labeled Health First Insurance. If the money was withdrawn, why was the policy canceled? I needed to think. I walked down the long hospital corridor toward the cafeteria needing coffee, or maybe just distance from my family. As I turned the corner near the vending machines, I heard voices, hushed urgent whispers. It was Trayvon and Jessica. They were standing in the alcove near the janitor's closet thinking they were alone. You have to fix this, Trayvon Jessica was hissing. Her voice was sharp, not the sweet tone she used at dinner. If he dies, they're going to look into the finances, probate court audits everything. Keep your voice down. Trayvon snapped. He sounded panicked. I know, okay. I am trying to figure it out. But Jada knows too much. She knows about the pension. Does she know about the insurance? Jessica asked. No, Trayvon said. Nobody knows about that. Dad thought I was paying the premiums. I told him I set it up on autopay through the business account to save on taxes. He didn't know I stopped the payments 3 months ago. My hand flew to my mouth. I stood frozen behind the vending machine. Trayvon, my own brother, he was supposed to be paying the insurance. He took the money from Dad and pocketed it. Where did the money go? Trayvon Jessica demanded. That is $3 grand. You said you paid the vendor. I bought your stupid bag, okay? Trayvon shouted in a whisper. The Hermes Birkin. The vintage one you wouldn't shut up about. You said if I didn't get it for your birthday you were going to leave me. So, I used the insurance money. I thought I would make it back at the casino before Dad needed a refill. Silence. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. He killed him. He didn't pull a trigger, but he pulled the plug. He traded his father's heart medication for a handbag. A handbag for a woman who despised us. You idiot, Jessica hissed. You bought me a bag with your dad's life insurance. It was health insurance, Trayvon corrected stupidly. And don't act like you didn't enjoy showing it off on Instagram. You tagged it blessed. Well, guess what, Jessica, we are cursed now. If Jada finds out I stopped those payments, she will put me in jail for manslaughter. She won't find out, Jessica said, her voice turning icy and calculating. Because you are going to go back into that room and cry. You are going to be the grieving son, and we are going to blame Jada. We stick to the story. Her stress caused the attack. The insurance lapse was a clerical error. The bank made a mistake. I reached into my pocket. My fingers brushed the cold metal of my phone. I didn't have the brooch recorder on me anymore. I had left it in the car, but I had my voice memo app. I pressed the red button. I stepped closer, moving silently in my sneakers. Are you sure she bought it? Trayvon asked. She has to, Jessica said. She is guilty. She feels bad. We just need to keep the pressure on. Tomorrow when your dad wakes up we tell him Jada came to the hospital to shout at him again. We ban her from the room. We isolate him. And then we get him to sign power of attorney over to you before he gets his strength back. Once you have power of attorney, we can sell the house before the bank takes it." "Sell the house?" Trayvon asked. "But where will they live?" "Who cares?" Jessica said. "Put them in a home. A cheap one. We take the equity and we leave Trayvon. We go to California." I had heard enough. I had the confession. I had the motive. I had the plan. I stopped the recording. I wanted to jump out and scream. I wanted to claw Jessica's eyes out. I wanted to punch Trayvon until he felt the pain his father was feeling. But I was Jada, the forensic accountant, and emotional outbursts didn't win cases. Evidence won cases. I backed away silently. I walked back down the hallway, my footsteps echoing on the linoleum. I returned to the waiting room. My mother was still praying. I sat down opposite her. "Mom," I said softly. She looked up, her eyes red. "You need to know something. Dad is going to be okay. But we need to make sure he is safe." "Of course he is safe," she said. "He is with family." I looked at the door where Trayvon and Jessica were walking back in. They had their masks back on. Trayvon looked devastated. Jessica looked supportive. They were holding hands. The actors were returning to the stage. I touched my phone in my pocket. "Family," I whispered to myself. I stood up. "I have to go, Mom. I have work to do." "You are leaving?" she asked, shocked. "Your father is in recovery. I can't help him here," I said. "But I can help him from my office." I walked past Trayvon. He wouldn't look at me. "Going to run away again?" he muttered. "Coward." I stopped. I leaned in close to his ear. "Nice bag, Trayvon," I whispered. "Hope it was worth it." I saw his head snap up. I saw the color drain from his face. He knew. I walked out of the hospital into the cool night air. I wasn't going home to sleep. I was going to the police station. Bank fraud was one thing. Forgery was another. But negligent homicide, or at least reckless endangerment, that was a different beast entirely. Trayvon wanted to talk about killing Dad. Well, he had just handed me the weapon. I got into my car and connected my phone to the Bluetooth. I played back the recording. "I bought your stupid bag, okay? I used the insurance money." I listened to it 3 times. I drove toward the precinct. The tears finally came then. Hot, angry tears, not for me. But for my father. He was a flawed, arrogant man. But he didn't deserve to die for a purse. My family was not just toxic. They were deadly. And I was the only antidote left. The drive from the hospital back to my parents' house was a blur of streetlights and shadows. The silence in my car was heavy. But it was nothing compared to the noise in my head. My father was lying in a hospital bed with a stent in his heart and a lie on his lips. My brother was wandering the corridors, terrified of a manslaughter charge. And my mother was praying to a God she hoped would pay the bills. I was the only one moving with purpose. My mother had asked me to go to the house to pack an overnight bag for her. She needed her toiletries, her comfortable slippers, and her Bible. She had given me her keys, her hands shaking so badly she dropped them twice. I pulled into the driveway of 452 Maple Avenue. The house looked imposing in the dark. It was a large brick colonial with white pillars and a manicured lawn. It was the physical manifestation of the American dream. It was the stage where my parents had performed their play of success for 30 years. But as I walked up the concrete path, the stage lighting flickered. The motion sensor light above the garage was burnt out. The landscaping near the porch was overgrown with weeds choking the azaleas. Cracks in the facade were starting to show. I reached for the front door handle, but my hand stopped inches from the brass lock. I froze. There was something taped to the door. It was not a flyer for a pizza place. It was not a note from a neighbor. It was a bright, aggressively red envelope taped at eye level with heavy-duty packing tape. The plastic window on the front revealed bold black capital letters that screamed in the darkness. Final notice of default. Below that, and smaller but equally terrifying font, were the words, "Sheriff's sale scheduled." I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked around the neighborhood. The street was quiet. The neighbors' curtains were drawn, but they must have seen this. The process server would not have been subtle. They would have pounded on the door. They would have taped this up for the whole world to see. My father, the proud Principal Washington, had a foreclosure notice on his front door that was brighter than a neon sign. I ripped the envelope off the wood, tearing the paint slightly. I did not care about the paint. The house did not belong to them anymore. I fumbled with the keys, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, quickly shutting out the night. I flipped on the foyer light. The crystal chandelier sparkled overhead, casting rainbows on the walls. It looked so normal. The smell of my mother's potpourri filled the air. The family photos on the hallway table smiled back at me. But it was a lie. This whole house was a corpse that had not been buried yet. I tore open the red envelope. My hands shook as I unfolded the legal document. I scanned the lines, my forensic eyes picking out the data points instantly. Borrower Vernon and Lorraine, $42,000. Principal balance remaining $148,000. I read the timeline. They had not missed one payment. They had not missed two. They had missed 6 consecutive mortgage payments, 6 months, half a year. I looked at the date of the auction, scheduled sale, date October 24th at 10 a.m. I checked my watch. Today was October 17th. The house was being sold in exactly 1 week, 7 days. I leaned against the wall, sliding down until I hit the floor. My father knew. He had to know. You do not miss 6 months of payments by accident. You do not ignore the dozens of certified letters that come before the red one. He knew the house was gone. That was why he was so desperate for me to sign that fraudulent promissory note at dinner. He needed to show the bank that there was a new guarantor. He needed to show them a new income stream to stop the auction. He was going to use me as a human shield. He was going to let me sign my name to a debt that was already terminal. If I had signed that paper, the bank would have come after me for the $42,000 immediately. And when I could not pay it instantly, they would have garnished my wages and ruined my career. He was willing to sacrifice me to save his pride for just a few more months. I stood up. A cold fury replaced the shock. I needed to see the extent of the damage. I walked past the living room and went straight to my father's study. This was the forbidden room growing up. The room where important business happened. I turned on the desk lamp. The desk was messy, covered in stacks of paper. But it was organized chaos. I started opening drawers. The top drawer held office supplies. The middle drawer held old birthday cards. I opened the bottom drawer. It was locked. I looked around. My father hid the key in the same place for 20 years. Inside the hollow base of a bowling trophy on the bookshelf, I lifted the trophy and the small brass key fell out. I unlocked the drawer and pulled it open. It was stuffed to the bursting point with unopened mail, hundreds of envelopes, some white, some pink, some red. I grabbed a handful and threw them onto the desk. Internal Revenue Service, final notice of intent to levy, American Express, account closed, charge-off, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, policy cancellation notice, Village of Oak Park, water bill past due. It was a graveyard of financial responsibility. He had stopped paying everything, not just the mortgage, everything. He was drowning, and instead of asking for help, instead of downsizing, he had just stopped opening the mail. He lived in a fantasy world where if he did not see the bill, it did not exist. And my mother, Lorraine, I walked upstairs to their bedroom to pack her bag. Her closet was full of St. John knits and designer hats. She had a collection of handbags lined up on the shelf. She walked around town like the queen of the suburbs. She had no idea. She truly had no idea that she was sleeping in a house that belonged to the bank. She was at the hospital right now praying for a miracle, unaware that next Tuesday, a sheriff was going to come and put her furniture on the curb. I packed her bag mechanically. Toothbrush, nightgown, Bible. I looked at the Bible. The truth shall set you free. Well, the truth was about to set them out on the street. I zipped the bag and walked back downstairs. I stood in the center of the living room. This house held so many memories, most of them bad but some of them good. I remembered learning to ride a bike in the driveway. I remembered Christmas mornings before Jessica came along. If the auction happened, strangers would buy it. They would flip it. They would tear out the carpets and paint over the memories. My parents would be homeless. They would have to move into a motel or worse, try to move in with me. No, that could not happen. A plan began to form in my mind. It was cold. It was calculating. It was exactly the kind of move Mr. Sterling would have applauded. I was a forensic accountant. I dealt in distressed assets. I dealt in leverage. Right now 452 Maple Avenue was a distressed asset. The bank did not want the house. They wanted the money. They wanted the bad debt off their books before the quarter ended. If I paid off the arrears, I would just be enabling them again. They would treat it as a bailout. They would never learn. But what if I didn't pay it off? What if I bought it? Not as Jada. If Jada bought the house, they would think they still owned it. They would think it was family property. They would disrespect me in my own building. I took out my phone. It was almost midnight, but I knew who to call. Michael Vance, the junior partner at my firm and the best real estate attorney in Chicago. We had worked late nights together on the Enron file. He owed me a favor. I dialed his number. He picked up on the third ring, his voice groggy. Jada, it is midnight. Are you okay? I am fine, Michael. I need you to do something for me first thing in the morning. Okay, what is it? I need you to form an LLC, a limited liability company. Sure, I can do that in my sleep. What do you want to name it? I looked at the red notice on the desk. I looked at the lies my father had told. I thought about the justice that was coming. Call it the Phoenix Group LLC, I said. No, that is too cliché. Call it Nemesis Holdings LLC, Nemesis. Okay. A bit dramatic, but fine. Who are the officers? Just me, I said. But I want my name completely shielded. Use a registered agent. I do not want my name appearing on any public search. I want this company to be a ghost. Done, Michael said, waking up a bit more. What is the purpose of the entity? Real estate acquisition, I said. Specifically purchasing distressed debt. Jada, what are you doing? Michael asked, his tone shifting to concern. I am buying a house, Michael. The address is 452 Maple Avenue, Oak Park. Silence on the other end. Then, a soft exhale. That is your parents' house, Jada. Yes, it is. Are they selling? Not by choice, I said. The bank is auctioning it next Tuesday, but I do not want to wait for the auction. I want you to contact the bank's loss mitigation department tomorrow morning. Tell them Nemesis Holdings LLC wants to make a cash offer to purchase the note. We will pay the full arrears and assume the principal balance, or we will buy the deed in lieu of foreclosure. Whatever gets the title transferred fastest. Jada, this is dangerous, Michael warned. If you own the house, you have to evict them or you become their landlord. I know, I said. Why not just lend them the money? Because they stole from me, Michael. They stole my identity. They stole my credit. And if I lend them money, they will never pay me back. But if I own the roof over their heads, I own the control. I want the deed, Michael. I want the piece of paper that says I decide who sleeps here and who doesn't. Okay, Michael said. I will draft the offer letter. How much cash do you have access to? I have my trust fund from my grandmother, I said. The one they don't know about. And my bonus from last year. I can cover the $42,000 in arrears tomorrow. Consider it done, Michael said. I will call the bank at 9 a.m. By noon, Nemesis Holdings should have a tentative agreement. Thank you, Michael. I hung up the phone. I stood in the silent house. It felt different now. A moment ago, it was a dying animal. Now it was merchandise. I picked up the red notice from the desk and folded it neatly, putting it into my pocket. I would not tell my mother. I would not tell my father. I would let them worry. I would let them think the end was coming, because the end was coming. The era of Vernon and Lorraine Washington, the king and queen of Maple Avenue, was over. Next week, when they came home from the hospital, they would not be coming home to their house. They would be coming home to my house, and the rent was going to be very expensive, not in money but in respect. I grabbed my mother's bag and turned off the lights. As I locked the front door, I looked at the spot where the notice had been. The tape had left a sticky residue. I would have to get that cleaned off, I thought. I didn't want sticky tape on my new front door. I walked to my car under the moonlight. The fear was gone. The sadness was gone. I felt lighter. I wasn't a victim of identity theft anymore. I was a real estate investor. And I had just found the deal of a lifetime. The Oak Park Country Club was a fortress of old money and exclusion. It was the kind of place where the carpet was so thick it swallowed your footsteps, and the chandeliers were cleaned by men on scaffolding once a week. My father, Vernon, had spent his entire adult life trying to get a membership here. He had been rejected twice, but tonight for his 40th wedding anniversary, he had rented the grand ballroom. He was paying for access he could not earn, and certainly could not afford. The theme of the night was ruby and gold. It was billed as a celebration of 4 decades of Black excellence, and a fundraiser for the church building fund. 2 days after I bought their house out from under them, through my shell company Nemesis Holdings LLC, my phone rang. It was Trayvon. I expected him to be panicked. I expected him to be screaming about the foreclosure notice I had removed from the door, but he was calm. He was arrogant. He sounded like a man who believed his own lies. "Jada," he said, his voice clipped and professional. "Mom wants you at the party on Saturday. She says it looks bad if the whole family isn't there. People will talk." I held the phone away from my ear, looking at the new deed to 452 Maple Avenue that was sitting on my desk. "I will be there, Trayvon," I said. "I wouldn't miss it." "Good," he replied. "But there is a condition. You are not sitting at the head table. You are not sitting with the guests. We told everyone you are going through a financial rough patch, and that you offered to help with the event coordination to save money." I raised an eyebrow. "You told people I am broke. We told people the truth, ungrateful, and needed to work off your debt to the family. So bring your black slacks and a white shirt. You are going to be helping the catering staff. We need you to make sure the donors' glasses are full. Consider it penance, Jada. If you do a good job, maybe Dad will forgive you for almost killing him." I almost laughed. It was perfect. They wanted to humiliate me. They wanted to reduce me to a servant in front of the people I grew up with. They wanted to show the community that I was beneath them. But they didn't realize that being a server gave me the most powerful position in the room. Invisibility. "I will do it, Trayvon," I said, keeping my voice meek. "I just want to make things right." I hung up and started my preparations. On Saturday evening, I arrived at the country club 2 hours early. I was dressed in black dress pants and a crisp white button-down shirt, the uniform of the invisible workforce. I entered through the service entrance past the kitchens that smelled of roasted beef and expensive truffles. I blended in perfectly. The staff assumed I was an agency hire. The event planner assumed I was a helpful relative. No one questioned my presence. I walked into the empty ballroom. It was magnificent and a Chargers gleamed under the lights. A massive banner hung over the stage reading, "Vernon and Lorraine, 40 years of faith and favor." I walked straight to the audio-visual booth at the back of the room. A young technician was taping down cables. "Hi," I said, flashing my most charming smile. "I am the daughter. My dad sent me to check the slideshow. He is very particular about the order of the photos." The technician looked relieved. "Oh, thank God. The file he sent me was a mess. Please, fix it." I sat down at the control console. I plugged in my encrypted USB drive. I opened the presentation file labeled Anniversary Tribute. I scrolled through the photos. It was a montage of lies. Photos of vacations they couldn't afford. Photos of cars they leased. Photos of Trayvon pretending to cut ribbons at business openings that didn't exist. I went to the end of the slideshow. I added a new section. I titled it The Real Cost of Success. Then I uploaded my files, the foreclosure notice, the forged mortgage document with my fake signature, the bank statements showing the gambling debts and the Hermes bag purchase, and finally the audio file from the hospital, the confession. I set the transition timing to 5 seconds per slide, long enough for everyone to read, long enough for the truth to sink in. I saved the file and ejected my drive. "All set," I told the technician. "Just press play when my dad starts his speech." "You got it," he said, giving me a thumbs up. I walked back out onto the floor. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text message from Detective Reynolds of the Economic Crimes Unit. "We are in position. Unmarked units at the north and south exits. 2 officers in plain clothes are inside near the bar. We will wait for your signal." I texted back a single emoji, a green light. I had met with Detective Reynolds 3 days ago, when I laid out the evidence, the forgery, the wire fraud, the insurance embezzlement. He had been stunned. He usually dealt with corporate schemes or identity theft rings. He had never seen a family cannibalize itself with such precision. He wanted to arrest them immediately, but I asked for the party. I told him that if he arrested them at home, they would claim it was a misunderstanding. But if we did it here in front of the witnesses, in front of the investors Trayvon claimed to have, it would be undeniable. The guests started arriving at 7. It was a parade of Chicago's black elite, pastors in three-piece suits, deaconesses in hats that defied gravity, local politicians looking for votes. They hugged my parents, they oohed and awed at the decor. Vernon and Lorraine stood at the entrance like royalty. My father looked remarkably well for a man who had a heart attack a week ago. He was wearing a tuxedo with a red cummerbund. My mother wore a gold sequined gown that must have cost $5,000. Money they didn't have. Money that probably came from another credit card opened in another relative's name. I stood by the bar holding a tray of champagne flutes. My father saw me. He excused himself from a conversation with a city councilman and walked over. He looked me up and down, his eyes cold. "Keep the trays moving, Jada." He whispered, his voice a hiss, and fixed your collar. "You look sloppy. Don't embarrass me tonight. I am just here to serve Dad," I said, lowering my head. "See that you do." He snapped, "And stay away from the head table. I don't want you hovering over Jessica." I watched him walk away. He strutted. He preened. He had no idea that the waiters pouring the water were actually police officers. He had no idea that the house he was going home to was already owned by the daughter he just insulted. Jessica arrived 20 minutes late, making an entrance, of course. She wore a red dress that was cut too low for a church event. Trayvon trailed behind her, looking nervous. He kept checking his phone, probably checking sports scores or seeing if his fake investors had replied. I circulated through the room, offering drinks. I became part of the furniture. I heard snippets of conversations. "Vernon is such a pillar," a woman said. "He has done so much for the school." I heard Lorraine is launching a foundation, a man replied. "They must be doing very well. That house of theirs is a landmark." I bit my tongue. The irony was acidic. Around 8 o'clock dinner was served. I helped clear plates. My hands were steady, but my adrenaline was redlining. I looked toward the bar. The two plainclothes officers were nursing sodas, watching the room. They made eye contact with me and nodded slightly. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. The pastor walked up to the microphone. He was a good man, a man who had baptized me. He truly believed in my parents, brothers and sisters. He boomed. "We are here to celebrate love. We are here to celebrate endurance. 40 years. Can I get an amen?" "Amen," the crowd shouted. "Vernon and Lorraine Washington have been a beacon of light in our community," the pastor continued. "They have raised 2 beautiful children. They have supported this church, and tonight we honor their legacy." My mother dabbed a fake tear from her eye. My father puffed out his chest. I moved to the side of the room near the stage. I needed to be close to the microphone when the time came. "Please welcome to the stage," the pastor said. "The man of the hour, Principal Vernon Washington." Applause filled the room. A standing ovation. My father walked up the steps waving like a politician. He took the microphone. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you all. God has been good to us. He has blessed us with abundance even when we didn't deserve it." I gripped the edge of a serving table. "Abundance. Stolen abundance. My wife Lorraine," he continued, gesturing to her. "My rock. And my son Trevon, the CEO of the future." "Stand up, son." Trevon stood up, buttoning his jacket, trying to look important. "And my daughter Jada," Vernon added almost as an afterthought. "She is working hard tonight, somewhere in the back. We taught our children the value of service." A few people chuckled. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter. "Now," Vernon said, "before we get to the fundraising pledge, I want to share a little video we put together. A look back at the journey." He pointed to the projection screen. The lights went completely dark. The music started. A gospel song about victory. The first few slides played. Vernon and Lorraine at their wedding in the 80s. Trevon as a baby. The family at Disney World. The crowd cooed. "Ah, so sweet." I looked at the AV booth. The technician gave me a wave. I took a deep breath. The music was about to fade. The transition was coming. I signaled the officer at the bar. He spoke into his lapel microphone, alerting the team outside to move in. On the screen, a photo of my parents in front of the house appeared. The caption read, "Our sanctuary." Then, the screen went black for a second. When it lit up again, the music stopped abruptly. The slide that appeared was stark white with red text. "The real cost of success. A murmur went through the crowd. People shifted in their seats thinking it was an artistic choice. Then the next slide hit. It was the foreclosure notice. High definition. The words "Final Notice of Default" were 10 feet tall. The murmur turned into a gasp. I saw my father freeze on stage. He turned around to look at the screen. His mouth opened. The next slide. The forged mortgage document. My name circled in red. The next slide. The bank statement. DraftKings $5,000. Hermes $3,200. Trevon stood up, knocking his chair over. "Turn it off," he screamed. "Turn it off." But the technician didn't turn it off. He was confused, looking down at his console. And then came the audio. I had synced it perfectly. My voice rang out through the ballroom speakers, clear and amplified. "Nice bag, Trevon. Hope it was worth it." Then Trevon's voice. Panic-stricken. "I bought your stupid bag, okay? I used the insurance money. I thought I would make it back at the casino before Dad needed a refill." The room went deadly silent. 500 people held their breath. Jessica's voice filled the hall. "You idiot. You bought me a bag with your dad's life insurance." Vernon stood center stage, illuminated by the light of his own crimes projected behind him. He looked at Trevon. He looked at Jessica. And then he looked into the shadows at the side of the stage. He saw me. I stepped out of the darkness. I was still wearing my server's uniform. I held a tray in my hand. But I wasn't serving drinks anymore. I walked up the stairs to the stage. My father was too shocked to move. I took the microphone from his limp hand. The feedback whined for a second, then settled. I looked out at the crowd. I looked at the pastor who had his head in his hands. I looked at my mother, who was frozen in her sequin dress like a statue of salt. "I am sorry to interrupt the celebration," I said, my voice calm and echoing off the walls. "But my father was right. They did teach me the value of service." I pointed to the back doors. "So tonight, I decided to serve the truth." The doors burst open. Detective Reynolds walked in, flanked by 4 uniformed officers. Vernon Washington, Lorraine Washington, Trevon Washington, and Jessica Miller. The detective announced, his voice booming without a microphone. "You are all under arrest." The room erupted. Chairs scraped. People screamed. Camera phones flashed. I stood on the stage alone in the spotlight while my family fell apart in the shadows. The party was over, but the cleanup had just begun. The spotlight on the stage was blindingly bright, cutting through the dim, romantic atmosphere of the ballroom. From my vantage point in the shadows near the service entrance, I watched my parents bask in the adoration of 500 people. They looked like royalty. My mother Lorraine was gripping the podium with manicured hands, her gold sequined dress shimmering with every breath. My father Vernon stood slightly behind her chest, puffed out, a frozen smile plastered on his face that did not quite reach his eyes. To the casual observer, they were the picture of black excellence and endurance. To me, they were 2 frightened people standing on a trap door that was about to open. I adjusted the collar of my white server shirt. The tray in my hand was empty, but I held onto it like a prop. It was my camouflage. For the last 2 hours I had been invisible, refilling water glasses and clearing salad plates for people who had known me since I was a child, but who now looked right through me. They saw the uniform and stopped seeing the person. They saw what my parents wanted them to see. A failure. A disappointment. A daughter who had been demoted to the help. Lorraine leaned into the microphone, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "We have weathered many storms," she said, looking out at the sea of faces. 40 years is a long time. The devil has tried to break us. Oh yes, he has tried. We have faced health scares. We have faced jealousy. We have faced betrayal from those closest to us. She paused for effect, letting the congregation murmur their agreement. "But we are still here," she declared. "And we are still standing because of the legacy we are building. A legacy that will be carried on by our son Trevon." She gestured to the head table. Trevon stood up, buttoning his tuxedo jacket. He waved to the crowd, looking every inch the successful CEO he pretended to be. Beside him, Jessica clapped enthusiastically, her diamond earrings catching the light. "Trevon is the future of the Washington name," my mother continued. "He is building a technology empire that will change the world. He is a man of integrity, a man of vision. And he has chosen a wife, Jessica, who supports him with grace and class. We are so proud of them. They are the children every parent prays for. The applause was thunderous. I watched Trevon beam. I watched Jessica preen. They were soaking it up. They believed their own press release. Then my mother's expression shifted. She looked down at her notes and her face took on a look of tragic sorrow. And tonight we also ask you to pray for our daughter Jada. She is here somewhere working in the back. As many of you know, Jada has struggled to find her footing. She has made some poor choices and has allowed bitterness to cloud her heart. But we love her. And we pray that one day she will learn the value of family and honesty just like her brother. A hush fell over the room. People turned in their seats, craning their necks to look for the wayward daughter. I felt their eyes scanning the room. They were not looking with pity, they were looking with judgment. My mother had just publicly branded me as the problem. She had used her anniversary speech to assassinate my character to explain away my absence from the head table. That was the signal. I did not feel anger anymore. I felt a cold clinical precision. She had just handed me the microphone. I walked out of the shadows. I moved with a steady, purposeful gait. I did not look down. I did not look ashamed. I walked straight up the center aisle. My server shoes silent on the carpet. The crowd parted slightly. Confusion rippling through the room. My father saw me first. His smile faltered. He took a step forward. His eyes narrowing into a warning glare. He made a subtle motion with his hand. A shooing gesture telling me to get back to my place. But I kept walking. I reached the steps of the stage. My mother stopped speaking. She looked at me with a mixture of annoyance and fear. Jada, she hissed away from the mic. What are you doing? Go back to the kitchen. I walked up the stairs and stood next to her. I was taller than her in my sensible shoes. I looked out at the crowd. I am sorry to interrupt, Mom, I said, my voice projecting clearly even without the microphone because the acoustics in the room were perfect. But since you are talking about legacy and honesty, I thought this was the perfect time to give you my gift. Your gift, my father scoffed, stepping in between us. Jada, we do not have time for this. Sit down. I have prepared a special video tribute, I announced to the room, ignoring him. A retrospective. To show everyone exactly how we got here tonight. The crowd murmured. A tribute. How sweet. She is trying to make amends. My father hesitated. He was a narcissist, and the promise of a video tribute appealing to his ego was too tempting to resist. He thought I had broken. He thought I had put together a montage of his achievements to beg for his forgiveness. He stepped back. Make it quick, he muttered. I nodded to the technician in the back of the room. He gave me a thumbs up. The lights in the ballroom dimmed until the room was pitch black. The massive projection screen behind the stage flickered to life. Soft gospel music began to play. Victory is Mine by Dorothy Norwood. The first few images were safe. My parents' wedding photo from 1984. My father holding a trophy. My mother in a hat. Ah, the crowd cued. Trevon and Jessica relaxed at the head table. They leaned back in their chairs smiling. Then the music stopped. It did not fade out. It cut off with a sharp, jarring scratch. The screen went black for 2 seconds. The silence in the room was heavy. When the screen lit up again, the image was not a photo. It was a document. It was crisp, high definition, and 10 feet tall. First National Bank of Illinois. Monthly statement. The account holder name was highlighted in yellow. Trev Tech Solutions LLC. But it was the transaction list that was magnified. October 24th. DraftKings Sportsbook. Debit. $5,000. October 25th. Horseshoe Casino. Withdrawal. $2,000. October 27th. Gucci, Michigan, Ave. POS purchase. Tri-Dolary. $200. October 28th. Porsche leasing. Payment. $1.800. The text at the bottom of the screen appeared in bold red letters. Source of funds: unauthorized home equity loan on 452 Maple Avenue. A gasp went through the room. It started in the front row and rolled back like a wave. Trevon shot up from his chair. He knocked his wineglass over. What is that? He screamed. Turn it off. That is fake. But the technician did not turn it off. I had told him the video was locked and could not be stopped once it started. The slide changed. The next image was a photograph. It was grainy, taken with a long lens, but the subjects were unmistakable. It was Jessica. She was standing outside a rundown motel in a bad part of town. She was arguing with a man who was definitely not Trevon. He was older, rough-looking, wearing a leather jacket. But the argument had clearly ended in negotiation. The second photo showed Jessica kissing him. It was not a romantic kiss. It was a desperate transaction. A kiss given to buy time. The caption appeared: Jessica Miller paying her gambling bookie. October 15th. The crowd exploded. Shouts of disbelief rang out. People were standing up, pointing at the screen. Jessica screamed. It was a high-pitched wail. She covered her face with her hands, but it was too late. 500 people had seen it. The deaconesses had seen it. The pastor had seen it. My mother Lorraine turned to look at the screen. Her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She looked at Jessica, the daughter-in-law. She had placed on a pedestal. That is a lie, Jessica yelled, pointing at me. She photoshopped it. But the show was not over. The worst was yet to come. The screen went black again, and then came the sound. My voice rang out, amplified through the concert-quality speakers. Nice bag, Trevon. Hope it was worth it. Then came the reply. Clear as day. No static. Just the terrified voice of my brother recorded in the hospital hallway. I bought your stupid bag, okay? The Hermes Birkin. The vintage one you would not shut up about. So I used the insurance money. I thought I would make it back at the casino before Dad needed a refill. My father Vernon froze. He had been shouting at the technician, but the words stopped in his throat. He stood center stage, bathed in the light of the projection screen. The audio continued. You idiot. You bought me a bag with your dad's life insurance. It was health insurance, Trevon corrected stupidly. And do not act like you did not enjoy showing it off on Instagram. If Jada finds out I stopped those payments, she will put me in jail for manslaughter. The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. No one moved. No one breathed. The air conditioning hummed, but that was the only sound. Vernon turned slowly. He moved like a man made of glass. He looked at the head table. He looked at his son. Trevon was standing there, his face draining of all color. He looked like a ghost. He looked at his father, and for the first time in his life, he could not lie his way out of it. The truth was echoing off the walls. Dad, Trevon whispered. It is not what it sounds like. Vernon took a step toward the edge of the stage. He looked down at his son. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The heart attack. The pain. The fear of dying. It wasn't just stress. It was theft. His own son had stolen the money that kept his heart beating to buy a purse for a woman who was cheating on him with a loan shark. Vernon swayed. I thought he might collapse again. But he didn't. He looked at me. I was standing next to him, calm and still. He looked at the screen where the evidence of his ruin was still displayed. Then, he looked at Lorraine. My mother was holding on to the podium for support. She looked at Trevon, and then she looked at Jessica. The facade cracked. The image of the perfect family shattered into a million pieces right there on the stage. I picked up the microphone from the podium. My father made a move to grab it, but he was too weak. I am sorry to spoil the party. I said, my voice steady. But my mother was right about one thing. The truth will come to light. I pointed to the back of the room, and I brought some people to help clean up the mess. The double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. Detective Reynolds walked in. He was not wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing his badge on his belt, and he was flanked by 4 uniformed officers. They marched down the center aisle. The sound of their heavy boots on the floor was the drumbeat of justice. The crowd parted for them. Reynolds stopped at the head table. He looked at Trevon. Trevon Washington, he said loud enough for the back row to hear. You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and reckless endangerment. He turned to Jessica. Jessica Miller. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and solicitation. He looked up at the stage. Vernon and Lorraine Washington. We have a warrant for your arrest regarding bank fraud and identity theft. The handcuffs came out. The metal clicked. Trevon began to cry. Not a dignified cry but a sobbing wail of a child who got caught. Jessica started screaming that her father was a lawyer, that she would sue everyone. My mother collapsed into a chair on stage, weeping into her hands. My father just stood there. He looked at the handcuffs on his wrists. Then he looked at me. "Why?" he whispered. "Why did you do this here? Why, Jada?" I looked him in the eye. "Because you wanted a legacy, Dad. Now you have one." I put the microphone down. I turned and walked off the stage. I walked down the stairs, past the officers, past the weeping guests, past the ruined anniversary cake. I walked out of the ballroom and into the cool night air. I checked my phone. The time was 9:30. The party was officially over. The silence that had gripped the room following the audio recording shattered instantly. It did not break slowly. It exploded. 500 guests, who had spent the evening politely sipping champagne and nodding at my father's speeches, were now on their feet. The sound was deafening. It was a mixture of gasps, screams, and the frantic murmur of people realizing they were witnessing the social execution of the Washington family. The pastor who had baptized me stood in the front row with his mouth open. He looked from the screen where the evidence of the embezzlement was still glowing to my father standing on stage. He shook his head slowly. A look of profound disappointment etched onto his face. He reached for his wife's hand and began to guide her toward the exit. That was the signal. The rats were fleeing the sinking ship. On stage, my mother Lorraine was the first to fall. She had spent 40 years building a fortress of lies brick by brick. She had crafted an image of piety and prosperity that she wore like armor. But the armor was gone now. She looked out at the sea of faces. She saw the judgment. She saw the disgust. She saw her friends, the women she sat with in the front pew, turning their backs on her. Her knees buckled. It was not a graceful faint. It was a collapse. She crumbled under the weight of her own shame, hitting the hardwood stage with a heavy thud. Her gold sequin dress pulled around her like spilled oil. "Lorraine," my father cried out, but his voice was weak. He took a step toward her but stopped. He was paralyzed. Vernon Washington, the man who ruled his household with an iron fist. The man who terrified students and teachers alike, was reduced to a statue. He looked at his wife on the floor. He looked at his son, who was trembling in the grip of a police officer. And then he looked at me. His eyes were wide, pleading. He looked like a child waking up from a nightmare, only to realize the monster was real. "Jada," he whispered, "stop this. Please. We are ruined." I looked at him. I felt a flicker of pity, but I crushed it instantly. I remembered the slap. I remembered the forged signature. I remembered him leaving me behind for a vacation I paid for. "We are not done yet, Dad," I said into the microphone. My voice was calm, cutting through the noise of the crowd. I signaled the technician one last time. The screen behind us flickered. The image of the bank statements and the mistress vanished. A new document appeared. This one was stark white, with a bright red border. The crowd went silent again, drawn in by the sheer scale of the text on the screen. Cook County Sheriff's Office. Notice of judicial sale. Property, 452 Maple Avenue. Date of sale, October 24th. Status sold. I walked closer to my father. I wanted him to hear this. I wanted him to understand the magnitude of his failure. "You are worried about your reputation, Dad," I said. "You should be worried about where you are going to sleep tonight." I pointed at the screen. "You thought you had until next week. You thought you could manipulate me into signing that promissory note to stop the auction. You thought you could use me as a human shield one last time." Vernon stared at the screen. He read the word "sold." "But I didn't sign it, Dad, and I didn't wait." I paused, letting the tension build. "The bank sold the note this morning," I announced to the room. "They sold it to a private holding company called Nemesis LLC. My father looked confused. "Nemesis," he whispered. "Who is that?" I took a step closer to him. I leaned in so only he in the front row could hear the steel in my voice. "I am Nemesis, Dad." His knees gave way. He grabbed the podium to keep from falling. "I bought the debt," I continued. "I paid off the arrears. I own the deed. I own the roof over your head. I own the bed you sleep in. And as of this morning, I have filed for an immediate eviction order." The crowd gasped. The whispers turned into shouts. "She bought the house. The daughter bought the house. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises, I said, cold and final. Pack your bags. But leave the furniture. That belongs to me now too. That was the breaking point. The pressure in the room was too high. Something had to snap. And it was Jessica, the woman who had played the role of the demure sophisticated heiress for 3 years, finally let the mask fall. She realized the game was over. She realized there was no money. There was no house. There was no legacy. There was only jail and poverty. She let out a scream that sounded feral. She ripped her arm away from the police officer who was holding her. She turned on Trevon. "You useless broke loser," she shrieked. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "You told me you had money. You told me your family was royalty. Look at you. You are nothing. You are a fraud." Trevon looked at her stunned. "But, Jessica, I bought you the bag. I stole for you. I don't want the bag," she yelled, spitting in his face. "I wanted the life. I wanted the status. I wasted 3 years on you. 3 years pretending to like your tacky mother and your boring father. And for what? For a foreclosure? For handcuffs?" She looked around the room. Her eyes wild. She saw the exit sign. She shoved Trevon hard. He stumbled back, tripping over my mother's prone body. "I am not going to jail for you people," she screamed, using the phrase that had started my war. "I am leaving." She kicked off her high heels and hiked up her red dress. She tried to run toward the side exit, but Trevon snapped. The golden child, the boy who had never been told no. The boy who believed he was a king finally realized he was just a pawn. He realized that the love of his life was a parasite who had eaten him alive. "No!" he roared. He lunged at her. He didn't care about the police. He didn't care about the audience. He tackled her. They crashed into a table of champagne flutes. Glass shattered everywhere. It was a cacophony of destruction. Trevon grabbed her by her expensive hair extensions. "You ruined me," he screamed. "You made me steal. You made me kill my dad. Get off me, you psycho!" Jessica shrieked, clawing at his face. Her nails raked down his cheek, drawing blood. It was chaotic. It was ugly. It was the lowest form of human behavior on display for the elite of Chicago. My father, Vernon, watched it all. He watched his legacy destroy itself. He watched his son brawling on the floor like a street fighter. He watched his daughter-in-law reveal herself to be a monster. He looked up at the ceiling and let out a sound that I will never forget. It wasn't a scream. It was a moan of absolute despair. The sound of a man watching his soul leave his body. The police officers swarmed the pile of bodies. "Get back, everyone, get back!" Detective Reynolds shouted. It took 3 officers to pull Trevon off Jessica. His tuxedo was torn. His face was bleeding. He was sobbing uncontrollably. Jessica was pinned to the ground. Her dress was ripped, exposing the spray tan she was so proud of. She was shouting profanities that would make a sailor blush. I stood on the stage untouched. I was the eye of the hurricane. I watched as they handcuffed Trevon again, tighter this time. I watched them drag Jessica screaming out the side door. The paramedics rushed onto the stage to attend to my mother, who had started to moan softly. My father sat on the steps of the stage, his head in his hands. He looked small. He looked old. He looked like a man who had nothing left to lose, because he had already lost it all. The guests were fleeing. They didn't want to be associated with this. They were running for their cars, texting the gossip to everyone they knew. By tomorrow morning, the Washington name would be mud. It would be a punchline. I walked over to the edge of the stage. I looked down at my father. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. "We have no home," he whispered. I nodded. "No," I said, "you don't. But I hear the homeless shelter downtown has vacancies. Maybe you can give a speech about legacy there." I took off my server's apron. I folded it neatly and placed it on the podium next to his undelivered speech. I walked down the stairs. Detective Reynolds stopped me near the door. "That was quite a show, Jada," he said, adjusting his tie. I looked back at the ruin of the ballroom, the shattered glass, the spilled wine, the broken family. "It was necessary," I said. "Are you okay?" he asked. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. For the first time in 30 years, I didn't feel the heavy weight of their expectations on my shoulders. I felt light. "I am better than okay, detective," I said. "I am free." I walked out of the country club. The valet brought my car around. It was still the Honda Civic, the dented one. I got in and started the engine. I had a busy day tomorrow. I had to meet with contractors. I was going to renovate 452 Maple Avenue. I was going to paint over the beige walls. I was going to tear out the carpets. And most importantly, I was going to change the locks. As I drove away, I saw the flashing lights of the police cars reflecting in my rearview mirror. They were taking my family away. And for the first time in my life, I didn't turn back. The party ended, not with a toast, but with the reading of rights. I stood in the shadow of the ballroom exit and watched the final act of the jagged broken sound that echoed off the high ceilings. He was begging Detective Reynolds to listen to him, trying to blame everything on Jessica, trying to bargain with information he did not have. But the law is a cold machine, and it does not barter with amateurs. I watched them walk him out, his wrists bound behind his back, the tuxedo jacket bunching up around his shoulders. He looked back at me once. There was no anger in his eyes anymore, only terror. He realized for the first time that his parents could not save him, and that his sister would not save him. Jessica was less compliant. She was shouting threats about her lawyers. Lawyers she could not afford. Lawyers who would laugh when they saw the evidence I had compiled. She was dragged out, kicking her heels, leaving scuff marks on the floor that matched the ones she had left on my soul for 3 years. My parents were not arrested that night. The detective decided to let them leave on their own recognizance, pending their arraignment. It was a small mercy, a final shred of dignity allowed to Vernon Washington solely because of his age and his heart condition. But as they walked out of the country club past the staring guests and the whispering waiters, they looked like prisoners anyway. They were prisoners of their own shame. The next 7 days were a blur of legal paperwork and logistical execution. I did not speak to them. I blocked their numbers again. I needed silence to prepare for the final move. I spent the week meeting with contractors, finalizing the deed transfer for the house, and trading in my Honda Civic. I had driven that dented car for 5 years, listening to them mock me for it. I kept it because it was practical, but practical Jada was gone. The Jada who emerged from the fire was ready to enjoy the heat. On the morning of the eviction, the sky was a bruised purple over Oak Park. I drove slowly down Maple Avenue. The leaves were turning gold and red, falling onto the lawns of the neighbors who were undoubtedly watching from behind their curtains. I pulled up to 452 Maple Avenue. The sight that greeted me was pathetic. My parents were sitting on the front porch steps. They were surrounded by boxes, not moving boxes, just cardboard boxes they had scavenged from the liquor store. Their clothes were stuffed into garbage bags. My father was sitting on his suitcase, staring blankly at the driveway. My mother was clutching her Bible, rocking back and forth. They looked like refugees from a life that had rejected them. I pressed the gate of my new life. The engine of my car purred a deep, throaty growl that vibrated in my chest. It was a Porsche 911 Turbo S in a custom slate gray. It cost more than the remaining principal on their mortgage. I pulled into the driveway and stopped right in front of them. My father looked up. He squinted at the car. He didn't recognize it. He probably thought I was a... I opened the door and stepped out. I was wearing a tailored navy suit and heels that clicked with authority on the pavement. I took off my sunglasses. "Jada," my mother breathed. She stood up, dropping her Bible. "Is that you?" "Hello, Mother," I said. "Hello, Vernon." My father stood up slowly, leaning on the railing. He looked at the car, then at me, then back at the car. The realization washed over him. The data entry clerk, the struggling daughter, the girl who couldn't afford a plane ticket. It was all a lie, a mask I had worn to protect myself from their greed. "You," my father whispered. "You have this kind of money." I ignored the question. It was irrelevant now. "I see you are packed," I said, looking at the garbage bags. "They kicked us out." My mother sobbed, moving toward me. "The sheriff came at 8 this morning. He changed the locks. Jada, he gave us 20 minutes to grab our things. We have nowhere to go. Trayvon is in jail. Jessica is gone. We called your Aunt Sarah, but she won't answer. The church won't answer. We have been sleeping in the car for 2 nights waiting for this. She reached out to grab my arm. Jada, please. You have to help us. You are our daughter. We forgive you for the party. We forgive you for embarrassing us. Just take us in. We can sleep on your floor. I stepped back out of her reach. You forgive me. I asked, my voice flat. You stole my identity. You tried to frame me for $150,000 of debt. You almost died, Vernon, and you tried to blame it on me. And you forgive me. We are family, Vernon said, his voice shaking. We made mistakes, but we are blood. I looked at the house. The brick facade was still imposing, but it felt different now. It didn't feel like a fortress of judgment. It felt like an asset. Line item 4 on my balance sheet. I have a proposition for you, I said. My mother's eyes lit up. She wiped her face. Oh, thank God. Thank you, Jesus. I knew you wouldn't abandon us. I walked past them up the stairs to the front door. I reached into my purse and pulled out a key. A shiny new brass key. Vernon watched me unlock the door. His mouth fell open. You have the key? He stammered. I told you at the party, Dad, I said, pushing the door open. I am Nemesis LLC. I own this house. I walked into the foyer. It smelled musty. The air was stale. I walked to the living room. The furniture was still there, just as I had ordered. The bank had seized the house, but I had bought the contents in a separate auction. My parents followed me intimately like guests in a museum. You bought it, my mother whispered, looking around. So we can stay. You bought it for us. I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. No, Lorraine. I bought it for my portfolio. This is an investment property. I turned to face them. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a document. It was thick, bound in blue paper. However, I continued. I am currently looking for tenants. Tenants? My father asked, confused. Yes, tenants. I have a unit available. It is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath unit. Garden level. Garden level, my mother said, frowning. You mean the basement? I mean the lower level suite, I corrected. It is fully furnished. It has a kitchenette, and it is available immediately. You want us to live in the basement? My father said, his voice rising in indignation. I am Vernon Washington. I built this house. I slept in the master bedroom for 30 years. You cannot expect me to live in the basement like a servant. I shrugged. Then you can live in the homeless shelter like a stranger. The choice is yours. I held out the lease agreement. Here are the terms. The rent is $2,000 a month. That is fair market value for this zip code. You will pay your own utilities. You will maintain the lawn and the landscaping as part of your rental agreement. $2,000? My father sputtered. Jada, we don't have that kind of money. My pension is gone. You know that. Then you better get a job, I said. I hear the grocery store is hiring baggers. Or maybe you can drive Uber. I really don't care how you get the money, Vernon. But if the rent is late by 1 day, the eviction process starts all over again. And next time I won't be the one waiting in the driveway. It will be the sheriff. I flipped to the last page of the contract. And there is one more clause. Clause 4 billions. I pointed to the text. Strict no guest policy. Specifically, any individual with a criminal record or pending felony charges is barred from the premises. My mother gasped. That means Trayvon. Exactly, I said. Trayvon is never setting foot on this property again. Not to visit, not to eat, not to sleep. If I see him here, if I even smell him here, the lease is void and you are on the street. Do we understand each other? Lorraine started to cry again. But he is your brother. He is facing 10 years in prison, Jada. He needs us. He needs a lawyer, I said. And since you spent all your money on his fake startup, I suggest you use a public defender. I place the pen on top of the contract. Sign it or leave. I have a contractor coming in an hour to start renovating the upstairs. I am turning the master bedroom into my home office. I need to know if I should tell him to clear out the basement or not. Vernon looked at the pen. He looked at the basement door. He looked at the luxury car in the driveway. He realized that the power dynamic had not just shifted, it had inverted. He was no longer the patriarch. He was a tenant. And I was the landlord. He picked up the pen. His hand shook, but he signed. Lorraine signed, next weeping silently. I took the contract and checked the signatures. No forgeries this time. I handed them a single key. This opens the side door, I said. The front door is for the owner. Do not use it. I walked back to the front door. I paused and looked at the chandelier. I remembered standing under it when I was 16 being scolded for getting a B in math. I remembered feeling like I would never be good enough for this house. Now I was too good for it. I walked out to my Porsche. I slid into the leather seat and started the engine. The sound was beautiful. I looked out the window. My parents were standing in the window of the living room watching me. They looked small. They looked trapped. I didn't wave. I put the car in gear and drove away. I drove past the neighbors who were watching. I drove past the school where my father used to be a king. I drove toward the city, toward my office, toward my life. I had paid the price of admission. It cost me a family. But what I got in return was something far more valuable. I got my dignity, I got my freedom, and I got the deed. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. I wasn't the girl who stayed behind anymore. I was the girl who moved ahead. And as the skyline of Chicago rose up in front of me glistening in the sun, I knew one thing for sure. The view is always better from the driver's seat. Have you ever had to turn the tables on someone who underestimated you? Have you ever had to buy your own peace of mind? My name is Jada, and my books are finally balanced. The most painful yet liberating lesson I learned is that sharing DNA does not guarantee loyalty. For years, I allowed my desperation for parental approval to blind me to their exploitation. I believed that if I sacrificed enough, they would finally see my worth. But I realized that takers do not love. They only consume. True freedom began the moment I stopped trying to buy their affection and started investing in my own peace. We must have the courage to sever ties with anyone who threatens our well-being, even if they sit at our dinner table. Your value is defined by your character, not your family's validation. Thanks for watching. Take care, good luck.